All right, all right. We are live. Live on both platforms. All right. All right. It's going to give everybody a minute or two to get here. This is a last minute live. Didn't have this plan. So I'm just going to wait a minute or two. And then we'll get started. All right. All right. All right. What's going on? We're just going to give it a minute or two. All right. All right. What's going on? Jessica Richards, Blade of Ash Tarth. All right. What's going on, Mario? It's all good, man. Gotta handle your business, man. Gotta handle your business. Gotta work, take care of life. Well, good to see you. I know it's been a minute. All right, so we are live on Instagram and we are live here on Facebook. I'm sorry, YouTube. I'm not doing the lives on Facebook. I do post the link. I actually post the video and the link to the video on Facebook after. All right. So while we're waiting, I'm just going to run through some announcements and get that out of the way. So that'll give people a few minutes. As you know, I like to run through those announcements, kind of go through the happenings of what's going on. So upcoming classes. Let me get through that. And again, all the information for upcoming classes, you can find all that here on the community section of the YouTube page. Okay. You could also find it. Check us out on Primordial Chaos 9 on Instagram. All the information to sign up for the classes I'm about to run through is on there. Again, that's Primordial Chaos 9 on Instagram. You could also check us out on Primordial Chaos on Facebook also. So everything I'm telling you, again, you can find advertised on those platforms. I try to keep them all on the same platforms. So whichever one you are subscribed to, you'd be able to get that information. All right, so we have upcoming the next class. Okay, so let's go to July. So we have two classes in July coming up. Now, if you are a Patreon member and your membership gives you access, you already have access to the class. If you are not a Patreon member and you want to sign up for that class, the first one is going to be on Saturday, July 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's going to be the Ancient Egyptian Vampirism class. That class for non-Patreon members, if you want to sign up, is $56. It can be paid by PayPal or Cash App. When you do send your payments for the class, please include in the payment notes your name and your email address so the link goes to the right email. All the information on the PayPal information and the Cash App information, again, are on those platforms. And then on the 17th, the following week, we're doing the second class, the Esoterical and Occult Bible class number 2. This is an ongoing series that we currently have going on. We're going through the esoterical breakdown of the scriptures, the origin of them, the history, how this connects to the occult, where these stories came from, and how this all ties in and affects what we do and what we study. Affects in the sense, the breakdown and meaning, valuable information that you can use for yourself and obviously to teach others. That will be on the 17th. And then on the 23rd, this is only for Patreon members. We are doing a traditional satanic mass in Latin, in the traditional Latin. That's going to be on Friday, Friday, July 23rd, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We are opening back up to if people want to come from out of state, but with a limit. We're not, since things are kind of more flowing now. If you would like to actually come and attend in person, we do have a limit. We're only doing it with a small amount of people, in addition to the local people we have here, the small amount. You can reach out and contact me, and I'll have to have a conversation with you, and we'll go from there. That ritual will be on the 23rd, with 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Friday night. Those are the next upcoming 3 events. Again, if you're a Patreon member and you have access from that tier level on up, you already have access to those events. If you are not, you can individually attend these events and pay individually. Reach out, contact me, and go to the platforms to see how you can sign up for those classes, okay? That's upcoming in July. If you haven't checked out the Patreon page, patreon.com/Beniti, Baniti. On there on the Patreon, I do private classes, lectures, rituals for Patreon members only. There's different tier levels. I'm sure you can find something on there. Tier 2 and 3 being the most popular. Tier 2 gives you access to the classes for $13 a month. Tier 3 gives you access to the rituals and classes for $25 a month. And then there's mentorship tiers. There's the Red Magus Mentorship Program, the Egyptian Hacker Program, African Witchcraft, Voodoo, and Sorcery tier that's on the Patreon. That's devoted exclusively to that. But on the mentorship tiers, please only sign up for that if you have the time to put in. It is work. It is time. And obviously, I don't want to waste your time, and I don't want you to waste my time. So check it out, patreon.com/Beniti, Baniti. Also, we have coming up in a few months, I know we're in end of June going into July, we have the Journey of the Black Adept Conference, which will be at the end of October, the 29th to the 31st. That's the last weekend in October. That we will be doing virtual, and we will be doing it live, but we will be having a limit as far as live is concerned. And if you are interested in attending that event, please send me an email, reach out to me, and I will send you the information. If you would like to participate in that event, whether virtually or in person, contact me and specify an email how you would like to participate, either live or virtually, and I will send you the information on that. Again, that's October 29th to the 31st. It's 3 days of workshops, classes, and rituals. This is the 4th year we're doing it. It's become an annual event. We do it the same time every year. It's always the last weekend in October. So we are proceeding forward to do that, a combination of live and virtual, okay? So you could reach out to me, send me an email in regards to that. And last, if you are interested in a spiritual reading or a consultation, let me explain quickly the difference between the two. There is a difference. Unfortunately, some people think they're the same, and they're not. The type of readings I do offer are various different telepathic readings, demonic telepathic readings. Reach out to me and request that info. Shadow work readings, which is a great place to start, where people are always asking, what's a good place for me to start on this path? It's always good to start there, uncovering the hidden self and dealing with certain aspects of yourself that you need to work on. That's a great place to start. Also do Egyptian god and goddess readings, voodoo hoodoo readings, and also hold on one sec. Voodoo hoodoo readings and Santa Muerte and spirits of the dead readings. If you're interested in any of them, reach out to me. The email address is in the description box of the videos. In the email, please include the days and times you're available and the time zone you live in. That'll make it easier to communicate and set up an appointment. And a spiritual consultation is different. That's basically a free-for-all, whatever you want to discuss. If you have questions on anything, or if there's something particular you want to deal with, we focus on that. That's how that works. All right. So again, for any of those things, you can reach out to me. The email is in the description box of the videos. Okay. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, just to put out there, because I know some people always say I hit the notifications and I don't get them. It's not just with my channel. Any channel you subscribe to, if you want all of the notifications, you must hit the drop down. Like when you hit the notification bell, there's a drop down menu that comes and it'll say subscribe to some, all. You must make sure all notifications are checked. So that this way, anytime any type of video uploads, whether it's recorded or live, you will get a notification. That's for anybody's channel, not just my channel. So subscribe. Don't forget to hit the like button and hit that notification bell. All right. That pretty much covers the announcements I wanted to run through. So you see the topic. This is obviously inspired by the work we did this past weekend on Friday night. We did the ritual of Set, the god of fury, chaos, and order. I'm going to touch a little bit on that. We did have a full moon on the 25th, so there was a lot of lunar or dark side energy that night. And not that it was actually, to be honest with you, planned to do it on the night of the full moon. As you know, my stance on astrology, it's helpful information, but I believe a good practicing adept or magician can work their spiritual power under any sign, any gift, any astrological planetary moon or sun influence. I don't teach that you should, like people will say, don't do work. And when the moon's in Jupiter, I find that to be a bunch of bullshit. We're chaos magicians. We can do anything at any given time. I'm not saying astrology does not help reveal certain esoterical and spiritual information, but you are not a victim, and it's not the tell-all be-all. You have the ability to alter your destiny and make those changes. So I say that to say that ritual wasn't planned under the new moon. Didn't even look at it, to be honest with you. But I noticed that night, it's just how the spirits work sometimes. Sometimes you're just guided in that path. But there was a lot of intense lunar energy that night in that ritual. All right. So the title of the video, Set Your Higher Self. You've heard me talk a bit about this off and on over the years, but I'm gonna go a little more in depth on a couple of things in regards to this that's important for us to understand and how we should apply the Egyptian mysteries, right? So the video, again, is titled for this reason, Set Your Higher Self, Destroyer of Osiris, Your Weaker Self, all right? So I want to talk about the story of Set and Osiris, what does that really mean, and how do we utilize that story and how do we apply it? That's number one. Number two, I want to talk about the solar bark of Re, the story of that just a little bit, and how it goes into the underworld and the Duat and how that connects to Ra and Apophis, what this symbolizes for us. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Important stories. And then I want to get a little bit into the symbolicism and the representation of Aset or Isis in all of this. Okay. Now we get on the surface, mainstream. They all teach this wrong. And 90% of them, it's not their fault. It's just how they take this on or interpret it. Now you could say, well, people on this path, they're interpreting it that way. We're looking at the esoterical breakdown of it. It's passed off almost on mainstream in a religious context. We hear all the breakdowns of, the Horus, the Set Osiris Horus story. Horus is the real Jesus and all this other stupidity. And everybody still correlates it to all of these religious stories because subconsciously they can't release that religious way of thinking, right? We hear the breakdown of how Set or Seth is portrayed as some religious devil character or figure, because in certain Kemetic circles, you will hear it described as that based on the understanding that they were given, depending on what system, school of thought, scholar, teacher, or elder they came up under. They will have an understanding that Set is this almost monotheistic, the way they describe the devil and monotheism is almost what they attribute to Set or Seth in ancient Egypt, if you're coming from that aspect of Egyptian or Kemetic understanding. And I'm here to tell you it's the complete opposite of what we've been programmed with and told for many years, okay? So one, let's talk about the Set, Osiris / Horus story. Let's start there because this is important, all right? We look at the esoterical understanding of this. First, we need to get a basic understanding of Set and know that how he is demonized and portrayed in mainstream is not really what he represents in Egypt when you go look at the records. One, it's important to understand prior, when you read the stories in the ancient Egyptian text, the pyramid text, the funerary text, where it talks about key deities and guiding the soul into the underworld. The two key that we know of today, or that is in place today, would be Anubis or Anubis and Osiris. If you go back to the pre-dynastic Egyptians, you will find out that role that we are so familiar with in the last 46 dynasties that Osiris has, Set used to uphold that role. He was the one that assisted Anpu or Anubis in guiding the soul into the underworld. Again, this all got changed and switched around because the whole story, what was the whole warring story? Why, when you read the story and do not have all the facts, you can get misled in thinking that Set was just an evil tyrant that was just trying to seek power. What was going on that Set wanted to overtake the throne and overthrow his brother Osiris? What was going on at that time? This is where people don't do their thorough research and history. They give you their interpretation of it. Again, somebody watching this can say, well, I'm giving my interpretation of it. No, I'm telling you, go check this out for yourself. So I'm not telling you because I like to tread carefully when we're talking a lot of history, because some of this history can be misinterpreted. So I don't want you to believe anything that I'm telling you. Well, anything in general. I want you to come to that conclusion and realization for yourself, number one. And whether you agree or disagree with what I'm saying, that's irrelevant. That's fine. But if I can spark your interest to look further into this, and as long as you come to your understanding and you're cool with that, whether it's in line with mine or anybody else's is irrelevant. But you will find when you do the research that a lot, when you go into ancient Egypt, they had a lot of areas they called nomes. These were sections where there were triads, sometimes set up in threes or deities of three, where certain people in those sections had a loyalty to certain deities. They were called cults, right? You had the Osirian cult, the Set cult. And this is why when you look at some of the names of the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, you'll see those that incorporated, like when you see a pharaoh Seti the First, they would put Set or another deity in their name because usually they guided their people under the allegiance to that particular deity. Well, what was going on at that time around the 21st, 22nd dynasty, the Osirian cult or group or followers wanted to rule ancient Egypt. And their approach to spirituality and deity was more monotheistic in approach, right? They believed, and in essence, there's some of it that when you look at it from an esoterical perspective, it makes sense. But then as you get later down during the time of Akhenaten, when they incorporated the sun and Ra and the triad of Ra under this one God concept, well, long story short, the Setian cult or Set cult was not in agreement with that. They had a more non-conformist approach, a more self-governing, self-rulership approach. So long story short, without getting into too much boring history, and you can research it for yourself, they were not in agreement with what was going on. So they decided to go their own ways and do their own thing. That didn't go over too well. So this is where differences of opinion came in, and this is where kind of disagreements came in, which led to war. So basically what takes place after that is, because the cult or the individuals who came up under that understanding of the way the cult of Set approached deity and spirit, they decided they weren't going to put up with this shit. So this is where this whole uprising comes, and the 72 conspirators of Set come in, where they wanted to overtake the throne. Now, is there a connection with that? With what we know as, it's not a coincidence, the number is 72. We know there's 72 Goetias. When you get later on down into the Goetia stuff that comes well after this, we do know when you get into some of that spiritual or cult doctrine, they say there's 72 angels of the positive light and 72 angels of the disagreeable light, or the Goetias, which really gives you your 144. That number is significant when you go into the book of Revelations. It's not saying, and I'm not going to get into all that today. I do talk a little bit about that in depth in the occult Bible class. But this is where that 144 comes from. There's a significance in that. This is why it talks about 144,000 being raised in Revelations. It's not talking about literally 144,000 people, because that would make no sense. Because what's the purpose of creating all this, going through all this death and destruction and all the bullshit we're going through in this existence for only 144,000 people to be spared? It makes no fucking sense. Why would some creator God create all of this for his own sadistic purpose, just so we can selectively choose 144,000 people? It makes no sense. Now, I know that's a concept that's big in religion. The Jehovah's Witnesses teach that. That's a big thing. Certain sects of Christianity believe it's literal. We'll say, yeah, because it says in there 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes. Okay, it gets more, there's more of a deeper meaning to that, but I'm not going to get too much into that. But there's a connection with this, is what I'm saying. These 72 conspirators are Set, right? They're led up. Now, one of the female warriors in this group that we must also acknowledge to a degree is Sekhmet, okay? Because Sekhmet is, as I've said many times before, the goddess Sekhmet is, when you'll find in a lot of in history and reading some of the Egyptian stories, when they went to war, they would invoke or do a ritual to invoke her energy and presence before they went to war, because she was the devourer and drinker of blood. It wasn't talking about literally, but she had a taste for blood. It says she was a devourer of the gods. Now that gets into certain higher forms of spiritual vampirism, which we'll get more into that in the vampiric class. There is a connection to what I'm talking about today to spiritual Egyptian vampirism, because when people hear vampirism or vampires and all that shit, they think of that Hollywood stuff. It ain't got nothing to do with that. Okay, there is people that are into that traditional vampirism and all that gothic shit. I don't mess with none of that stuff. I don't knock anybody that does. That's your choice. I don't deal with none of that. I'm dealing with it more from a very mental and spiritual perspective, because the spiritual practice of absorbing energy and mastering the subconscious mind, which are all high forms, and the subtle body and the chakras are all higher forms of spiritual vampirism. That's the perspective that I'm coming from, and that's the perspective I will be teaching in that class. So Sekhmet was one of that led this revolt, right? She's one that sided with Set. So these 72 conspirators joined Set, and they basically conspired to get Osiris off the throne. We know the story. He's tricked into laying in this coffin. Body is sent down the Nile, and it's cut into 14 pieces, right? Okay, there's a significance in that number too. All this has meanings. You gotta make sure you're paying close attention. We also know the story continues. Now, this is interesting where Aset comes in, okay? Or Isis. We know that she finds 14 pieces of Osiris's body. It uses the phallus And this is where we get our immaculate conception concept from in Catholicism, the virgin birth. It's stated in the story from the phallus, she gives birth, this immaculate virgin birth without the aid of a man, and gives birth to who we know as Heru or Horus. Horus grows up and sets out to avenge his father's death. And then we know the story that comes into play, the taking of the eye of Horus. Now the war continues between Horus or Heru and Set. All right. The important thing to understand, what this really symbolizes and connects into. I'm going to go into a section here in a good book, which I've mentioned this book many times before. I like to give out the sources so you can do your research and you can see where I'm getting this from. I'm going to give you 2 books I suggest if you're interested in further doing research. There's a book called Seth, The History and Legacy of the Ancient Egyptian God Who Killed Osiris to Usurp the Throne. Author's name is Marcus Carabas. All right. This is put out by Charles River Editors. They put out a series of books on different aspects of history. So I'm going to put that up there so you can see it. This book gets into some good, it's not an occult book. I just want to put that out there. It's not a left-hand path book, but it is a book that has you very useful and good information in it. So I would definitely suggest you look into that book. And it's coming from a very open perspective. And then this book I've mentioned many times over the last few years. This is Set the Outsider by Judith Page and Don Webb. Set the Outsider by Judith Page and Don Webb. If you're familiar with Don Webb, he was a high priest in the Temple of Set. Judith Page also is an ex-member. Now, she has evolved more into lighter aspects of spirituality, but it's a good book to get both sides of that understanding. Don Webb deals more with the darker side of Set, and I find Judith Page gets a little bit more metaphysical when it comes to Set, which is okay. But to understand this internal war that this represents, how is this all connected? We're talking about this again. Set, which really represents our higher self, and Osiris, which really represents the weaker self or the lower self, or Set Osiris / Heru. Okay. Now I'm going to go to a section in here on page 15. There's a short section in here on Horus and Set, and actually some of the students that are in the mentorship program have gone through a whole informational aspect of this, and they've gone through spiritual rituals understanding this, because this is very important for us to understand. As a Black adept / magician, occult practitioner, the goal here is to understand where you need to be in getting that personal inner harmony you need to be successful. This is what this Set Heru energy really represents, okay? Or Osiris / Heru energy, right? Horus and Set are 2 of the primary Nitas of ancient Egypt. However, the word Nita means something rather more than just God as we understand the term. Horus, more promptly known as Heru, is invariably portrayed as the hawk god. He can be seen in traditional form as the hawk-headed man, or else glimpsed as the celestial falcon, which was equated with the king. And there's an aspect of Heru or Horus called the hawk-faced Lord. It's a darker aspect, again, not really talked about in mainstream platforms. All right, so I'm going to go through this stuff here. When I'm done, I will go back to your comments and your questions, and I'll do my best to get to them, so be patient. I just want to run through this stuff here. All right. He can be seen in this traditional form. One of his brother's earliest images is in the shape of the odd beast known as the Set animal, with its characteristic square-topped pricked ears and arrow-shaped tail. But he is better known through the form of the opposing man-beast, who later became the ultimate expression of darkness. Now, there's many different theories on the animal head mask that Set wears. Some say it's a hippopotamus. Some say it's almost some type of jackal or canine. And I said this many times before, the reason why it cannot 100% be described, there's a reason for that. because there is no definition for it. Chaos, primordial chaotic energy, and darkness has no limitations. It has no boundaries, no restrictions. So when you're really looking at this animal-headed mask of Set, your mind wanders into a bunch of different things because you can't quite put your hand on it, because it has the snout. Like if we look at this picture here again on the book, as you see it, it has almost a snout. It almost looks like a dog. But then you look at the ears and you try to figure out, what's that? Then you look at the red that's on the headdress. There's depictions of Set where with the red hair or color red, which we'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. And that was big in the ritual that we did Friday night. Red is a very symbolic color when doing ritualistic work with Set. But we see just in the image and presence of how he looks visually, there's no order to it. That's not by coincidence. You could look at every other deity in ancient Egypt and clearly define what animal that is. But why is it Set is the only deity that you can look at and there's no 100% drawn conclusion? I don't care what you pull up. You can research. There's certain individuals out there that might have their own 100% opinion on it, but I'm not talking about opinion. I'm talking about factually nobody anywhere written can 100% certain say for sure what animal that is. And there's a reason for that, for the reasons I just described. All right. Although you should never separate them, such a great unbalance has developed over the millennia. Now, there's also a very famous image some of you guys may have seen. See that image right there with the one body, and then you have the two heads. One head of Set facing one way, one head of Heru or Horus facing the other way. This represents harmony within the individual. Because contrary to belief, Set is the higher intelligence or aspect of yourself. We might classify that with rebelliousness, but no, that's the part of your nature and spirituality. When you speak out against something, that's not right. When you stand up for certain things, people call that in certain areas rebellion, but that's obviously taking a nonconformist approach. That's part of the understanding of the isolated consciousness, where you are not influenced by things just because everybody else might be doing or saying them. You stand on your own. That's where you regardless of what flack you might get for that, you've decided that you're going to walk your own path. Where Heru or Horus and this Osiris, good father-son thing, represents the lower or the weaker self, because that is the conformist self. That's the one that gets in line with all the mainstream ideologies. It's almost like when you look at the Star Wars story, you have the Sith, where they're guided by their passion, because their passion is their power. And sometimes that passion can be misinterpreted as being evil or wrong or disagreeable. And then you have the do-gooders, right? The Jedi Knights, who are chasing this illusionary aspect of peace that doesn't really exist, because the only peace that really exists is within the individual. Because when you start chasing this illusionary aspect of peace, because we'll be here today, gone tomorrow, and they keep feeding us this concept that one day we're all going to be getting along with each other and we're going to love each other in peace and love, and I love you and you love me, and let's hug each other. That will never exist. That's just fact. Because by nature, we are tribal. By nature, the blood that runs through some of our veins is warrior type of energy. And sometimes, as I said before, you can walk into a room and never met a person before, but something about their energy you just don't vibe with. So it will never, ever be to that point. So that illusionary concept of peace is not real. Inner peace is obtained when the individual has a true understanding of themselves, because that inner peace brings harmony that now can reverberate throughout their entire life, internally and externally. And the individual now has the ability to understand themselves and master themselves spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and oh yes, financially. This is what the real understanding of Set Heru is. Let me continue. All right. So much so that Horus gets all the attention, all the praise, and all the invocation, while Set is scorned or feared. yet they are twins. Horus and Set belong together, and we need them both within us. Now, I've been saying for years, and I've made this comment on both sides of the spectrum. Okay, we always talk about right-hand path philosophy, and which is a term for more lighter systems of spirituality, as I joke around and like to use the term fluffy stuff, new agey stuff. You know, I've always said for years, they're wrong in the sense that everything is peace and love and light this and that, and suppress all the bad stuff about yourself. Ignore it. Don't give in to the mundane world. Meditate it away, pray it away. That's bullshit. That doesn't work. Shadow work is the complete opposite of that. It's not running away from it. It's embracing it and addressing it. They're wrong in that context. But I've also said on the flip side, which nobody catches, because I always get this question over the years. People come to me and go, "Oh, did you guys do stuff like meditation?" I laugh when they say that, because I'm like, what kind of concept do you have in your mind about the occult and the left-hand path? Do you do like meditations and healing work? Most definitely we do. That's a big part of this path. Meditation is one of the key, meditation and visualization techniques, I will also add that in, is something we utilize consistently on a regular basis. You better most definitely believe we do that. I've always said it's not about completely suppressing and burying the light in its totality, because you do need some of those lighter energies and mesh them with the right personal formula with those darker energies, so you can come up with your own formula of harmony. See, that's what this is about. Now, I've also said on the flip note, there are people on the occult and the left-hand path who go to the extreme with all this gloom and doom and dark stuff. Everything is just dark and gloomy and gloom and doom. And I'll be honest with you, I'll call it for what it is. That shit can be overdone too, where everything is just to the extreme. So what I'm saying, in essence, on both sides of the spectrum, there is that, guiltiness on both parties. Where we come into play, and what I try to teach and get people to see, is you've got to be centered in the middle of the two. You can't be spoon-fed how much of that light stuff you should take in and be forced. And then you need to understand your parameter in the void and the abyss and the darkness, your parameter, how you set it, not somebody else. This is in essence what Set and Heru / Osiris represent. All right, so let's continue. Having said that, we will talk about the mythology and magic relating to the eyes of Horus and Set later. But remember, that one eye can see distance, but two eyes working together are needed in order to perceive the world in 3 dimensions. So now we see why Horus's eye was taken in one of the battles with Set, right? Because we saw that when that eye is taken in the story, Set's spiritual power becomes weak. And therefore now we see why he wears the right eye is covered, because it was taken out, right? You see that depiction and you read it in the story, in the text. All right. We'll get into that as we go along. When we can often do more than stagger through life, scarcely able to master its depth. There's a picture of a man with the heads of both Natirs that represents, the one I just showed you, that represents the magical idea of Horus and Set in complete balance. In a sense, this is the ancient equivalent of the yin and the yang, right? No difference. Now, you see this warring story, which represents the battle of your internal will, right? We see this whether it's in the Enki and Enlil story, when we go back to ancient Samaria. We see this depicted in the Bible a couple of times, whether it's the story of Cain and Abel, or whether it's the story of Jacob and Esau in the Bible, right? The warring brothers story is something that these cultures pass down in these different traditions. It's just the story's told over, but the names and the titles change due to the language and the culture. That's the kind of things I go into the esoterical Bible class. Break all that down so you can see where that stuff comes from and you can have that understanding. And again, as I've said in that class, and I know some of you are taking that class right now, that class is not, I don't want you guys to take that class to go bashing religious people. No, that's not what the class is for. It is some very useful ammunition. You can do that, trust me. You can step on their head and crush them with information, but I'm telling you that it's a waste of time, because most religious people have tunnel vision. They're not, you can smash them upside the head with facts. They're just not going to accept it. And it's not for that. One, first and foremost, that class and that information is for you. One, to better yourself, and two, to give it to people in the right environment that sincerely want it. Don't waste your energy with people that don't want the shit. It's not, at this stage in the game, that shit ain't worth it. Because some people just want to debate shit for the sake of debating it, and it's pointless. Okay? So we see this story is told many times, right? And as explained here, it talks about the yin and yang, a symbol that had nothing to do with Kemet, but which expressed everything about it. Within the bright yang, there is a core of darkness. In the darkness of a yin, there is a spear of light. They are inseparable, or in other terms, Horus and Set strive unceasingly. So you can't have one without the other. Okay? So this isn't about, now when we use the term, I want to say this, and I've said this many times before over the year, I use the terms because it's what people can relate to and connect with. When we use the term occult and left-hand path, let's just establish something. They're just terms. They don't really, in essence, mean anything. And let me explain. As we know, the word occult is the Greek word for hidden. That's all it means. Something, a mystery that is hidden. Actually, you know what? It just reminded me. There was a brother that sent me an email from Greece who watches my videos and gave me a good breakdown on this. And I've been meaning to read this on here. And bam, my mind just went straight to it. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. I found this interesting. And this brother reached out to me a couple of times and sent me some good stuff. Let me pull it up. Bear with me here. All right, here it is here. This is a brother named Kianos from Greece that watches my channel. And he gave me a good breakdown on this. And I'm not sure if you see this, if you're not on here now, Brother Costas. I want again, or his full name, Konstantinos. Wow, interesting. I thank you for sending this. And I've been meaning to find the right time to read this. But let me read this to you. He even put just so you can see, I don't know if you can see on the phone, he even put the Greek language in there with the breakdown. He sent me an interesting email on the word daemon and the word occult. And I want to go through this real quick. All right. And it says, greetings from Elis/Greece. I am Costas or Konstantinos. I'm watching your videos on YouTube, and I'm interested about what you're talking about. I know some occult books, but I haven't read them all or practiced anything yet. But I like knowledge, or gnosis, as my ancestors were calling it. Even now the word hasn't changed. I wanted to comment on your latest video just to inform you the word demon comes from, now look what he put, the Greek translation for me. I don't know if you can see that there. Put it right up there. See that? The comes from the Hellenic/Greek word, and he put daemon or daemon, and it was sacred, very important, and a very respectful word. The word agathodaemon comes from two words. Now you're getting this from somebody born and raised in Greek that speaks Greek language. And this is why I wanted to read this. And I appreciate him for sending this. And I'm not sure if you're on here now or you do get a chance to watch this again. I want to say thank you to you. All right. The word agathodaemon comes from two words. The word meaning pure-hearted and humble. And the word daemon, which I mentioned earlier, not everything came from Egypt. We had our own mystical, magical tradition. So in essence, what he's saying here, we know Hermeticism, which combines those mysteries, because we know obviously when the Greeks went into Egypt, what he's saying in essence here is they also had their own spiritual cultural practices that they were doing even before some of the Hermeticism got connected. And I found this very interesting. But of course, when we mixed all of these with the Egyptian knowledge, the thing ignited. Many thanks for the videos and the knowledge that you're sharing. With respect, Costas. That was his first email. All right. And then he sent me something on the Trident, and I thought this was interesting. His response, I sent him an email thanking him. I said, greetings, thanks for watching and supporting the channel. Thanks for the information and clarity. I'm going to read your email in my next video and share that information. Thanks again, infernal blessings. And as I said, I'm no different than anybody else, always willing to be a student in the sense that I want to learn. And we all should be that way. And like I say, I don't get on here like some of these other fools who have egos and want to pretend like they know everything. And they can't humble themselves to learn. Now I have to humble myself. This is a person born and raised in Greece, speaks the Greek language. I can't refute that. You understand? And he's giving me the breakdown, right? That's what this is about. All I care is about correct information. And he just expounded on more than what I knew. So here was his response. He said, "Anytime, brother, I appreciate that you responded to my email. Also, the word psyche comes from the word that means soul. As you can see, the letter looks like a trident. Check that out. The Greek, the letter that they use for soul, for psyche, look at that. I don't know if you can see it. Is that a coincidence that we use this, okay, on this path? The symbol of the trident is one of the most important symbols. I believe that the Hellenic Greek letters have deeper meaning. I am grateful that you would share this in your video, and always a pleasure to exchange knowledge about history, philosophy, and ancient traditions and mysteries. I am fascinated by those things like that. Looking forward to your next video, and hope to communicate with you soon. With respect, Costas." I just wanted to share that, throw that in there because it reminded me as I was going through some of this stuff, and I was trying to find the right moment to share it. But I find that very interesting, important. Okay, so the terms occult and left-hand path don't really, in essence, mean nothing. They're just adjectives to describe a practice, a thing that we do. Left-hand path is just, you're saying you're in opposition to mainstream. That's all it is. It's a term. I only use it in this day and time because it's something people are familiar with. Because left-hand path they can pretty much stereotype it, where you think when you hear the word left-hand path, immediately you think everybody that practices left-hand path is a member of the Church of Satan or something like that. And that's not what it means. That's one aspect of it. A Luciferian can be classified as a left-hand path practitioner. It's anything that goes against the norm. Don't get caught up in the titles. And the word occult just means hidden. That's it. So when you say you're an occult left-hand path practitioner, you're basically making that statement or taking the approach of what we call apotheosis, self-deification. And that's why I like to call it a path of self-mastery more than I like to call it the left-hand path or the occult. That's it. So we don't want to get caught up in that, because that can get us confused too. All right, so let's continue with this. All right. We needn't look at the pantheons yet. There are far too many. We would get lost within minutes. Okay, and wander for years getting nowhere. What we must do for now is reduce everything to this binary of light and darkness of Horus and his brother Set, and see how they can and do resonate within our own psyches. And that's why psyche has root in that word. And again, as he broke that down in there, we use a lot of these Greek terms in the occult and Hermeticism. And in the English language. And if you understand basic history, you understand that English is the youngest language on the planet. And if you've ever done, we all went to school and did basic elementary and middle school and high school work. When you pull out a dictionary, every English word comes from some language that came before it, from the old French, the old Greek, the old Latin, right? There's no English word that doesn't. I told you, English is a broken language because when you just go through phonetically the sound of the alphabet, right? It's the only language that's confusing. It's the only language where PH can be the same sound as F, right? It's the only language that spells pneumonia with a P and the P isn't pronounced, right? I can continue on. Go through the alphabet, right? C can be a K, a hard sound, or it can sound almost like S. Which one is it? But this is how you know these weren't original pronunciations. It's not like that in other languages, only in English. And this is why it can be very confusing. And I noticed this with young children, myself growing up, and I even noticed it with my young son now. They catch this as kids when they first start learning at a early age. Why is that? Because they'll spell it the way it sounds. And then we get mad at them because they hear phone, F-O-N-E. No, phone's P-H-O-N-E. How is P-H the same as F? How does that work? That goes to show you it's a language that has no tones, no frequencies. It's a baby language. And again, all you got to do is pull out Webster's dictionary and just look up words, and it'll tell you from the old French, the old Latin, the old Spanish, the old whatever. from something that predated it. So we have to be careful. But we in the occult, we use a lot of Greek terms: apotheosis, psyche, occult, right? All these words have their root in the ancient Greek language. Hermeticism is all enshrouded in Greek and Egyptian mysteries, just as that brother Costas from Greece was saying in his email. And they had their own practices that they were doing prior to that, before the integration. But he's right, as he said, as that all got integrated, it all got mixed up. So we do sometimes, maybe we do have to check ourselves when we say, I know we all quick to say, oh, everything comes from Egypt. And I used to be guilty of that. Caught myself saying that shit all the time. I mean, yes, a lot of things have its root in ancient Egypt. Don't get me wrong. But we need to sometimes look at things in its totality, right? All right. We will learn that the actual stories in due course, but in the meantime, we must invoke them to visible appearance and see how they can lead us towards our goal. Now, this is how we work with archetypes and deities on this path. This is why we do rituals. So I'm going to pause here before I get into the breakdown internally of Set, Horus / Osiris. We need to understand this. One, okay? This is where you understand the archetype and you're able to work and design rituals around them to create it for that intentive purposes. So for an example, which I talked briefly, I posted a video the other night after the ritual we did Friday night, a glimpse into the ritual. It's just basic, quick breakdown and a little minute and a half snippet of the altar. But that ritual is centered on a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here, but through the mysteries of the pentagram, right? In that ritual, we had the pentagram on the center of the altar. At each point, we had a red candle. And there's 5 aspects that the psyche is activated in understanding this. Though the ritual is called Set, the god of fury and chaos, order follows it, though. Because you must uncover that fury, that chaos, in addition, which goes into other areas of emotional energy in your psyche. Good, bad, sadness, happiness, joy, all of those things. And then one must make order of that understanding based on how that affects them. So each point of the pentagram of Set is a little different than what we know as the mainstream pentagram that's used. I'm not talking about the regular 5-pointer star that's used in Wicca and all that stuff. That's more earth-based, more nature magic. When we talk about the inverted pentagram, we're very familiar with that through just the inverted pentagram or with the head of Baphomet imposed on top of it. But when you use the pentagram of Set, the points don't touch the circle. And there's a reason for that. The points don't touch the circle because there's no boundaries in this. I'll expound on that a little bit more another time. I'm even thinking about doing a video on that. You'll notice when you look at the pentagram of Set, most pentagrams, the points are touching the circles. No, that chaos it's engulfed in all that chaos. There's no points. There's no lines. There's no parameters that are set up. So there's a reason for that. There's many meanings of the pentagram. Most people have basic understanding of it. I know it's one of the most widely used occult symbols, whether very watered down aspects of Wicca or white, or when I say white magic, just earth magic, that deals more with nature. And that's used a lot, as you know, in Wicca and witchcraft practices. And then there's the inverted pentagram with the point down. That's more familiar, that's used in darker or occult magic. So the ritual is centered on activating those 5 points within the psyche and the soul, which gives you a hidden understanding of yourself. And as I said in this, understand this. Yes, there is straight shadow work that one does that focuses on specific personal things. We all do that, and that's important. But as I said before, in essence, all of your ritual work has some form of shadow work in it. Why do I say that? Because is not the purpose to do ritualistic and spiritual work to better yourself? Is that not the same reason why you do shadow work? So in essence, you're always doing some form of shadow work. Whether, though you might not literally be labeling it that or calling it that or defining it that, but that's what it is. Because you're always doing work to transform and evolve and become that comment of apotheosis, self-deification, become a master, a god, or a goddess. That's your goal. Okay? So let's continue now. Let's get a little more breakdown of what does this harmony represent within us. Let's get a little more scientifical and spiritual now. It's important to understand. All right? Set can express the unconscious mind, the red blood cells, chaos, rebellion. Now, there's also something in Egypt called the upper crown. There's not a coincidence here, because I want to connect this. The red crown and the white crown of ancient Egypt. Red is synonymous with that red crown of Egypt with Set and as the red god of the desert, right? We know Upper and Lower Egypt was defined by those red and white crowns. So here we see the red blood cells, chaos and rebellion links into Set, which is the higher self. And then we have Horus, which can represent the conscious mind, not the unconscious, but the conscious mind, white blood cells, order, conformity. This is why I use that concept of Set being the higher self and Horus, Heru/Osiris representing the lower self. There's a difference, people. Right? So there's that red and white. We can and should dispute these. The whole point about Seti and conscious is that nothing can be written in concrete. However, once we have determined some tentative associations, there are different ways and levels which we can experience them. We have to do this to make them come alive within us. Or rather, we have to do this to make ourselves realize that they are alive within us and always have been. We can experience Set physically by looking at our shadows on the ground before us. These shadows tell us that we exist. They are created by the interplay of light and substance. Without substance, there would be no shadow. All would be light. Not for nothing was Set regarded by some as the true earth god, the real lord of this world. And this is why, really, in essence, there's no such thing in essence of darkness and light. They're really the same thing. Now, even when we look scientifically from outer space, it creates, because in darkness there's light. It creates the illusion when you look at images from outer space that everything is engulfed in darkness. And it is, but that true light shines in the darkness. And this is what we mean when we say one must go into the dark to do the work of the light. You cannot have true light. And when we correlate that spiritually, intellect, unless you go into the darkness. And that's why I've said many times before, religious people read their Bible and they don't catch it in the book of Genesis. Before God said, let there be light, it's confirmation he existed in darkness. So is darkness a bad thing? It's only bad if you perceive it as that because you don't understand it. Okay? This is all these concepts that come to play in the hidden understanding of Set/Heru Osiris, right? Okay, emotionally, by confronting what many can feel are dark emotions and learning to decide whether these are evolutionary or simple displays of pettiness or downright nastiness, which can hold the individual back. Set might be dark, but he is not evil any more than a surgeon is evil. I find that interesting. Mentally, by rebelling against dogma, taking a stand against the old orders, challenging current assumptions, playing devil's advocate to cherish notions, even especially your own. This is the higher self that Set represents, emotionally and mentally, right? Spiritually, by devising techniques for what might be called coming into being, or as we call on this path, Kepara, the self-realization of who and what you are. Not who you think you are, not the illusionary you. But doing this work brings you to the realization of who you really are by stripping away all the illusionary aspects of yourself that you created, by the way, that are self-created, because you embrace these false concepts along this life and journey. And some of it through being immature and stupid, and that's fine. That's life. That's just how we learn. But at some point, Set brings you to the realization of this understanding of who you really are. Spiritually, okay, by devising techniques for what might be called coming into being and learning to stand out from the crowd, accepting full responsibility for your actions. right? And that's what we mean when we say we are God/goddess. Not God/goddess in the sense of what a religious person describes as God. No, that's not what we mean. We say we're a God/goddess because, religious people get all, their panties in a bunch when they hear that. Oh, blasphemy, that's crazy. You can't say that. I don't mean it in the sense of how you've been programmed in religion or what that means. Because I know you think there's some old man in the sky with a gray beard sitting there dictating everything to you. No, that's not what we mean. We mean being responsible for our actions, taking accountability for the good and the bad. We like to pat ourselves on the back when it's good. But then when something goes wrong or something's bad, we're quick to point the finger to blame, right? So that's important. Spiritually, that's one of the aspects of understanding how to work with this, okay? How can we experience Horus? Well, perhaps the first part of the individual reader's initiation might be answering that for himself, looking through the Setian attributes above and trying to find Horian complements. The Set animal is not the sort of creature you could spoon feed, and neither should we allow that to happen to ourselves as travelers in this realm. Whatever associations you can make, they are real and workable. You might come to view them much later as naive or even absurd. But the important thing is that you have made effort, and effort alone will make their images come alive. The effort, the striving will imbue them with the ka, right? However, the pantheons of Kemet can crush us with their weight, or at very least confuse us by the tendency they have to try and drag us into their own mysteries. The lesser and greater gods can feel at times like street vendors in modern Cairo, beckoning the tourist with the urgent promise of something. There were different beliefs using the same natirs at places like Men-Nefer, Memphis, Wasset, Luxor, and Heliopolis, to name just the major ones. Scholars have spent lifetimes trying to reconcile the different recensions, as they are called, and none have yet been successful in trying to fit square pegs that were never pegs in the first place into round holes that were nothing of the sort. In order to learn about Set, first we must have the unlearning return to that complete darkness. See that? Okay? That has to be first. So that's the difference. It's not that we don't utilize light. It's not that we don't utilize those lighter energies. We know we must start first in the root of that eternal darkness, right? Which actually supports the light. See that? As we travel, we will learn that it is Osiris, Horus, Ra, and all the other good gods of Egypt who are the usurpers of the intruders. They are the instigators, the agitators. Okay? And we're taught the reverse, though. We're taught it's the other way around, and that's not true. All right? They overturn the old eldritch worship of Set and demolish the stellar darkness he represented, as in the case of paganism that managed to survive the relentless Christianizing of the West. The worship of Set, his liturgies and images can still be found to seep through into the religions of the solar gods. The simple essence of the present theme is that for eons now, Set has been scapegoated. And we'll get into that in a second. Just as fundamentalist Christians have demonized other religions, or even in medieval times, the entire female species of any religion. So has Set suffered at the hands of those incomers who established the regency of Osiris throughout the land of Kemet? As with the myth of Jesus, Osiris has, through the actions of his followers, caused as much harm as good. We don't look at it like that, though, because this do-gooder concept of Osiris is jammed down our throat. You see it in all of these Kemetic concert circles. Oh, Osiris is the father. Heru or Horus is the son or savior or messiah figure. I told you this is where they get their Blessed Virgin Mary Trinity concept from in Catholicism. Where do they get the Immaculate Conception from? That Mary gave birth to this savior child without the aid of a man. In that story I mentioned earlier, in this uprising, after Osiris was killed and his body chopped into 14 pieces and spread upon the Nile, they retrieve the parts and she takes the phallus, according to the text, and is able to use his phallus to give birth to this divine child called Horus. Okay? This is where we get our Jesus story. Not a coincidence. Okay? But people like to so focus it so much on the religious aspect. All right? But it goes deeper than that. All right? So when you really look at the story of Osiris, as it said, we don't look at as some of that caused more harm than good. We don't want to accept that. We look at it as if that's not true and that doesn't exist. Osiris, the king of eternity, Osiris, the everlastingness, who traverses millions of years, Lord of lords, the prince of princes, the governor of the world. The titles are infinite. He is visualized as a mummified man wearing a white cone-like headdress with feathers. Let us do without him except as an example of stasis, a terrible warning of what humanity is encouraged to become, in fact, slaves. Picture him motionless and trapped. Now rip that image apart to only the sun, moon, stars, and the night that binds them all remains above the land of Kemet and your young psyche. These represent the obvious and visible mystery, particularly the stars to which the souls were believed to ascend after death. In magic, the different ages of worship can be classified as stellar, which was when Nut and Set were first worshipped. That gave way to the lunar, and finally to the solar age when the pantheons attached to Osiris and Isis were born. Throughout the ages, Set would be viewed in different ways in different light. Here are some of the traditional slanders that have been heaped upon him. Set is a deserter. Set hates friendship. Set is a god of drunkenness. Set is a god of crisis. Set is a disturber of the peace. Set has no respect for boundaries. Set is sexually irregular, sensual, immoderate, foolish, and indescribable. Set is a divine murderer. Set destroys order. Set is aggressive and vicious. Right? This is the thing we hear. Clearly, Set is no social worker, but when we look at how, and in the First World War, British propaganda portrayed the Germans as torturing baby-eating women, abusing monsters, we have to realize that such crass techniques were used by the Osirians to blacken the die-hard worshippers of Set many thousands of years earlier. And that's what I was talking about in the beginning of the video, right? The fact is, Set was once a popular god of the common people. He was not worshipped just because they fear him. Through Set's breath, the worms emerged from inside the earth. He was the lord of metals and of iron, and was called the bones of Set. Okay? In some sources, the solar bark, and that's the last thing I want to finish with, talk about that. The solar bark is actually shown as being pulled by Set animals, why that god is the only one strong enough to fight off the dreaded Apophis, serpent that threatened the world's stability. Later, of course, when the scapegoating began, Set was deliberately and wrongly identified with the same serpent and figure of true evil. And that's a mistake where people in modern day, more lighter paths of Kemetic philosophy, some will say Set and Apophis are the same thing. And that's not true. That's a poor understanding. I want to touch a little bit on the solar bark ray, right? Let's talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to finish with that, Set's role in that, and then I'll go through the chat. If you guys got any questions or comments. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let me back up here. I'm going to go into this other book that I showed you guys earlier. Hold on. Solar bark array. Let me find that. All right, this is the last thing I'm going to go through. The solar bark and Apophis. Let's talk a little bit about this real quick. This won't be too long. The story of the solar bark, or the boat of Re, is one of the principal features of Egyptian mythology, since it not only embodies the prominence Re held in the religious mindset, but it also serves as a good example of the ancient Egyptian concept of cyclical time, or cyclical time, cycles, right? Ancient Egyptians believed that Re traversed the sky each day in a glorious bark equipped with a highly trained crew of deities that guaranteed its safe passage. Once the zenith had been reached, the bark would slip down the sky towards the west, where lay the dreaded entrance to the land of the dead, the Duat. This is important to understand, to show you they don't talk about this significance of Set in its correct context. This is my point. At the horizon, Re and his crew would change into the night boat called the Mesquitet. Although it still belonged to Re and therefore was still the sun boat, the Mesquitet was named as such because it was associated with perishing, as Re was said to enter the land of the dead and die there temporarily. To the ancient Egyptians, the Duat was no blissful land of rest. It was a sprawling terrain that spanned the underworld from the west to the east, and it was replete with the dangers that threatened the reemergence and effective rebirth. See that? Of Re and the sun that was the source of all life in the land of the living. This kind of story is indicative of acclaimed mythologist G.S. Kirk's second definition of myth as an operative, iterative, or valatory story, the type of which tended to be repeated regularly on ritual or ceremonial occasions. To bring about a desirable continuity in nature or society, it was the role of the priest to repeat this story each day, most probably with supporting ritual to aid its efficiency, so as to ensure the continuation of the cosmos. Naturally, this is not unique to Egyptian mythology, but the role of Set in its proceedings is particularly interesting. Important. This is really important to us from an esoterical aspect because it's going to show you the importance of what Set represents to us in working magic. He is one of the most powerful forms or masks of the adversary to understand and master ourselves. That's the point. Okay? The god of disorder and chaos boarded the solar bark each day and took a place of prominence on it at the bow, alongside a cadre of other deities, including the sister he tormented and the nephew who would be his greatest adversary among the gods, being Heru, right, or Horus. Excuse me. Seth took up his scepter and iron lance and embarked on the perilous journey. The surviving sources tell of a journey of 12 hours that involved the cadre of deities having to vanquish the enemies of Re and his boat with the help of a variety of divine aids. From fire-spitting cobras to the ancient god Akir, whose two sphinx-like heads face away from each other at either end of his flat body. It is at the 7th hour. Now, if you're familiar with the 12 gates or the solar bark array, there's 12 duats or gates every night, because it says from midnight till dawn that he would go through these 12 gates, right? And at each gate, there were deities there. The 7th and the 12th gate are of importance here to understand what this represents to us. Now, also for reference, a year or two ago, between a year and 2 years ago, I did a whole video here on YouTube on the journey of Ra to the underworld. I think the video is titled. I would recommend you get a chance, go watch that when you get some time. About a year, between a year and a half to 2 years ago, somewhere around there. You can find it in the archive. I would suggest you watch that because the whole video in class is on what I'm talking about now, but goes more in depth. All right. It is at the 7th hour, however, or the 7th gate, that the bark encounters its most formidable enemy. He counters him twice. The serpent Apophis, which is the Greek word, another term named for a pet. Seth's connection with Apophis is an integral one to Egyptian mythology and shows Seth to be more virtuous than he was later depicted. Right? So you see here, this how they make him out to be this monster. You see here, you're going to get a whole nother aspect and understanding and why this is never talked about in its correct context. I believe, obviously, there's an agenda and a reason for that. All right. Set was the strongest of the gods, and as such, he had a prestigious place on the great solar bark that traversed the skies. Okay. Each day and contended with the perilous land of the dead, the Duat, at the night. To the ancient Egyptians, the rising of the sun was not a guaranteed phenomenon each day. And many of the spells and rituals recorded in the surviving literature attest to the fragility of the cosmos and the priest's role in maintaining it. Okay? The Duat, although ruled by the benevolent Osiris, was seen as a land of dangerous monsters and demons, and so the solar bark needed Set at its prow to protect it. How come it wasn't Osiris? How come it wasn't Tahuti? We saw his father, Atum Ra, or Re, couldn't do it, right? Because his approach was delusional. He thought you could destroy a pet. Remember, he was trying to destroy him. That chaos. And chaos can only, it's energy, it can only be kept at bay. And Set was the one who was able to manipulate that chaotic energy and work it in his favor. So who sat at the bow or the head of the boat leading the protection and keeping the cosmos in order, the Greek word for the universe? Who was the individual that had the power, and none of these other great deities in Egypt were able to do it? Who was the one in the 7th and the 12th gate that was able to keep Apophis at bay? That was Set, people. Understand that. Now apply that. Who sits at the bow in the eternal bow or boat of your soul? And who is the only adversary, spirit, demon, God, whatever you want to call it, that can make order out of your personal chaos and give you protection in the sense of making that order? That's Set, people. So whether we go into other pantheons and use the different aspects of the adversary, Lucifer, Satan, any of these terms, they're titles, that's all. But again, it was Set, okay? The ancient Egyptians told the story of progression, all right, of the soul bark through the duat by the hours of the night. Each hour was like an episode of the divine adventure, and each episode had its gatekeeper and its challenges. At the 7th and 12th hours or gates, however, the solar bark encountered its most fierce monster of all, Apophis, or a pet. Depending on the source, Apophis is either depicted as a great crocodile or most commonly as an enormous serpent. He was said to have been born from Neat's saliva while she was still in the eternal waters of Nun. Now we get the understanding. Here's the breakdown in Egyptian cosmology of the chaotic waters of Nun. This is important, people. It's no different when dealing with Tiamat and the primordial chaotic waters of Tiamat and Leviathan. You're getting just the Egyptian aspect. It's the same thing. We're talking about Leviathan. We're talking about the adversary, darkness, and how all this emerged from that primordial chaotic energy. Well, this solar bark of Ray story is the same thing, people. That abyss that you're going into, that darkness, that duat or abode, that this solar bark, and I say solar bark, sun, solar, soul. Let's apply the esoterical breakdown of it. Who is sitting in the seat of your soul right at that heart chakra, guiding your internal solar bark of Ray, the soul or sun? Set, people. Okay? Not Osiris, not Horus. You can't get it done if you don't understand the energy of Set. So you got all those people walking around talking all this Egyptian stuff, Hotep, the Hoteppers, half-steppers, Hoteppers, whatever you want to call them, and they don't have this understanding. They're giving you this, this divine light. No, it's a little more than that. All right. So now this takes us in this solar bark array set at the head, going through these chaotic waters with a representation of Nun. I haven't even gotten to the Ogoad yet. I don't know if I'm not gonna do that today. I'll get into that another time because I got a short section left. And then I want to go to your questions. But look, man, there's a lot of hidden gnosis in this breakdown here. If you really understand this is a helpful tool for you to really understand what this path is about. All right. So it deals with the eternal waters of Nun and being a monster of discord. He began his life by trying unsuccessfully, meaning a pet, to swallow the eternal waters and stop the universe from coming into being at the onset. Apophis is essentially the manifestation of chaos. Who is the one taking control of this situation? Set. The ritual that we did the other night, and most of the work you do with Set, is about making order out of this chaos. I told you, you mentally, on an unconscious level, take that boat journey every night when you go to sleep. You may and may not realize it sometimes. What do I mean by that? Most of the time, from the late hours of the night, I've mentioned this many times before in previous videos, and I'm going to mention it again. How many of us have sometimes laid up in the bed late at night with so much thoughts running through our mind and we can't get to sleep because we got certain worries in our head? We're worrying about what we're going to do tomorrow. How am I going to take care of this? I got this problem. I got to get this money. I got to do this. I got to do that. That's Apophis. Your mind that you're taking, that's Apophis or chaos coming to you in that 12th hour. You understand that? That we all mentally fight. We all take this boat journey every night. We all do the same thing. This story is telling, yes, what happens to you in the duat, the void in the abyss, whether you call it the abode of the dead, the void in darkness. You take that every night you go to sleep, people. That's my point I'm trying to get at. You take your solar bark journey every night. Sometimes successfully. And if Set ain't at the seat or the boat, you won't have an effective journey. You will get to that 12th date, or sometimes the 7th, and get devoured by Apophis. That chaos can devour all aspects of your life when you are not prepared to deal with it. All right. So Apophis is essentially the manifestation of chaos. He embodied the Egyptian concept of Isphet in every action and appearance in the mythology. By trying to impede the solar bark on its natural journey. Apophis' role was that of interrupting the natural state of the universe, Ma'at, right? The duality here is unmistakable, but the earlier myths allow for a level of cognitive dissonance too, meaning ignoring the facts. We got a lot of people who have cognitive dissonance when it comes to not wanting to accept change. This path will challenge a lot of things you might have stood firm on for years that you believe to be correct. But people have cognitive dissonance when it comes to understanding who and what Set really was and represented. That's the reality. You can't dispute it because the information is here. So let's stop portraying this one-sided without having an understanding, right? For instance, to the ancient Egyptians, a snake was a symbol of protection and of rebirth and renewal. But in the case of Apophis, the symbol was flipped on its head in order to provide the gods with their ultimate adversary. So there's duality in the nature of the serpent. The serpent can be a very devouring and vicious entity, as described here, but we also know the venom of the serpent can heal. There's healing, regeneration, and renewal in the serpent, just like there is in your personal chaos that this serpent, Apep, represents. So chaos, in essence, is not a bad thing. It's just how do you perceive it, and then how do you understand it, because you understand it based on your perception. So if you perceive, oh, chaos, you hear that word, oh, it's a negative, that's such a bad thing, then yes, you'll get devoured by that chaos. So when we talk about devouring, and we hear that term a lot on this path, you're not destroying anything in the sense that it disappears. You're remanifesting that chaos into something more productive. Because remember, we're talking about energy. All of this is energy. Energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be manipulated and remanifested. Okay? We're beings of light and energy. We may physically die, and our physical existence, when we give up the breath on this realm, ceases to exist. But the etheric aspect of our soul continues on. That's what this night journey. You're literally traveling in another world or dimension, in another existence, every night you go to dream state. That's what the understanding of the astral realm is about when you're working on this path. The astral, though, remember, is only the doorway or the gate to many of these realms. There we get the term in religion where Jesus said, my Father's house is of many mansions. You're getting that here. This is where it comes from. Okay? It's the many different levels of your subjective consciousness and subjective realms is where greater levels of spirituality and black magic will work. Because the goal of the magician is to have the ability to work and manifest something and bring it into existence on their subjective consciousness or realm. But here's where a good black magician has the ability to take what they've created subjectively in their subjective consciousness and make it a reality on the objective realm. This is what we do. And it's real, people. It's only as real if your realization and understanding of it. If you don't have it, it's not real to you. All right. All right. And then the last thing here, the dissonance was not unique in this myth. However, as the role of Set, Horus, and Osiris, great adversary, was also inverted, since he was the champion of Re and the slayer of the enemy of Pre-Daily. It would seem that the ancient Egyptians were quite comfortable with this level of dissonance, or at least irregularity in their myths. But as time went on, the lines became less blurred, and Set's and Apophis roles came into starker contrast with the world of Ma'at. All right. So I'm going to stop there. And that's kind of what I wanted to go through. So what I'm going to do, give me 1 second. I'm going to step away for a quick second. I'm going to go through, as time permits, your questions and your comments. So if you got some questions and comments, what we talked about, I know there's some in there already. I'm going to go up to the top, and I'll start from there. Give me 1 minute. I'll be right back. All right, let's go ahead and get into this. Let me scroll up. I'll try my best to get to as many of them as I can. May not be able to get to everything. I'm kind of going to skip conversations and comments amongst you guys. Try to get to the questions. Don't look like there's too much in here. All right. So again, infernal blessings. Peace in the sense of positive energy always creates elevation to all. I know I greeted Jessica Richards earlier. If you're still here, Blade of Astareth, Mario, good to see you here. Mario Polk, I know it's been a minute. Good to see you. Bradley B asked earlier, do you ever teach of voodoo or the events pre-recorded in Patreon more than YouTube? I have a whole, I'm not sure how long you've been on, Bradley, but I have a whole tier on Patreon, a mentorship tier dedicated to voodoo, African witchcraft, and sorcery. I would also encourage you, go through the archives here on the YouTube channel. There's classes and videos in here. Just when you get time, go through them. But there's a lot of videos you'll find in there. So, yeah, quick answer to your question, most definitely. It is one of the paths we do definitely deal with and talk about and work with. Okay? Reg deity greeting. Shadow work reading was excellent. Well, I appreciate that. Like I said earlier, if you came on late, that's a great place to start. When people say they come on this path, where should I begin? One of the spiritual readings I do focuses exclusively on shadow work. It's a shadow work reading that uncovers all those hidden aspects of yourself that you need to work on. It can be an intense, traumatic type of reading because it brings up a lot of personal stuff, but important things that you need to know. I've always said the most effective way to work this path, step one, is shadow work. Step two is demonic integration, along with ancestral work, connecting to your spiritual and bloodline ancestors, not worshiping them, connecting with them, venerating them, because they are you, you are them. You can't worship yourself. Those are the three pillars of foundations I show my students in the mentorship programs. You need to understand that. That is the foundation to build this house of spirituality. Again, I'm going to say it again: shadow work, demonic integration work, and connecting with your bloodline and spiritual ancestors. So that's a great place to start. Shadow work readings. Again, as I said, I also do telepathic demonic readings. That could be a Beelzebub reading, a Lilith reading, a sorcerer witch reading. There's different types that I do when it comes to, working with those telepathic demons or spirits. And then I do also Santa Muerte and Spirit of the Dead readings, voodoo hoodoo readings, which is dealing with some of the voodoo, the loas, and the different spirits in the voodoo pantheon. And Egyptian god and goddess readings, which connects with some of the ancient Egyptian deities. I do offer all of those different types of readings. You can reach out to me. The email address is in the description box here on the YouTube. And again, I appreciate the comment, Reg. Ursula R. says, yeah, finally get to tune in for a live stream. I really want to take my time learning about Set. He has been making himself known in my life for a while now. Well, that's good. Definitely get those 2 books I put up earlier. Let me put them up again if you came late. Again, this is not an occult or left-hand path book, but it has some good knowledge and information on Set. Some of you might be familiar with this printing company. They've been around for a while, Charles River Editors. They put out a lot of different historical books. This one is on Seth, the history and legacy of the ancient Egyptian god who killed Osiris to usurp the throne. Author's name is Marcus Carabas, but Marcus is spelled M-A-R-K-U-S, not C-U-S, as main known, and Carabas, as it sounds, C-A-R-A-B-A-S. This is a really good book. It's a thin read, but it's packed with a lot. The last section I went through about the solar bark array is in here in its entirety. There's a lot more information and breakdown in here on this whole connection. This is a good book, good read, quick read. And then this book, which I've mentioned many times before here on the Primordial Chaos YouTube channel. This is Set the Outsider by Don Webb and Judith Page. Now, be careful, because when you pull this up on Amazon, there is another book also that Judith Page did by herself called Song of Set. And the cover looks exactly the same. And sometimes people get confused. The Song of Set basically are different. It's a good book. I've actually used them in visualizations and meditations. They're poetry or poems that are written about Set by Judith Page. It's pretty cool stuff. But be careful when you pull it up. Make sure you're getting the Set the Outsider by Don Webb and Judith Page. This is a really effective understanding, again, in relationship of what we're talking about today. Those were the 2 sources or books that I used today. I know a lot of you have Set the Outsider over the years. A lot of you may not have the Marcus Carabas book. I would get it. Really good book. All right. Adam said, I think I saw a dragon manifested near me when I was going to sleep. What do you think that could mean? I'd be here just speculating. It could mean many things. I have no idea what was going on that day, what's going on in your life, what you practice spiritually. All of those conditions can influence what you're seeing. Usually something like that, if you're stumped on it, that's why I do spiritual consultations or readings. That would be probably the best way. And I'm not just saying that to promote it or put it out there, but that's the best way through deviation to uncover that if you can't figure it out on your own. But to just be randomly speculating would be a waste of time. But it could mean many different things based on things you got going on in your life and things that might have went on in the past leading up to the present moment. Okay. So that's the best answer I can give to you for that. I don't want to just randomly speculate. That's a waste of time. Blade of Astar says those Kemetic types hate Set and Apep as well. Oh, they do. Because again, as I said in the very beginning of the video, part of it's not their fault because they're coming from lineages or lines of traditions, whether it's schools of thought, teachers and elders, that's what they were taught. And that's what their elders taught them. So it's kind of like a cycle that's passed down. It's almost like how we're spoon-fed if some of us grew up in monotheism forms of religion, be it Christianity, Islam, or Judaism. It's kind of becomes, our parents were that, their parents were that, their grandparents were that, et cetera, et cetera. It's passed down to us. But we break that cycle and chain by addressing that. because we just saw, and I don't know why they portray it as that, because that's not what the information in the text shows. So let's say they're interpreting it like that, right? Because I'm not going to lie, back in the day, going back in the 80s and early 90s, I was in that mindset when I wasn't back in them times in the late 80s and stuff, in the early 90s, not really practicing what one would call fully the occult left-hand path. I was of that understanding because a lot of the elders and teachers that I came under, that's what was taught to me, so it's just a lack of understanding on some of our parts and not doing the research. And again, this is not an opinion. This is something you can pull this information up and access it yourself. Everything in that story we were just talking about, the solar bark array, that stuff can easily be accessed. And then you look at it now with a clear mind. You must look at it and not have that indoctrination that we've been suppressed with the understanding we were spoon-fed. And when you look at this story, solar bark array, why was he put at the bow or the base of the ship to navigate it? This is all really deep esoterical breakdown of it. He was the guide. He was the protector. He was the thing that kept order in the cosmos. And look at that internal. Remember, they call this area here. Don't forget. They know what the fuck they're talking about. This area here is called your what? Your solar plexus. I've said this many times before. Okay? Now, why would this be called the solar plexus? Okay? Is there literally some type of fire burning inside of us? Yes. The Ethiopians and in some of the ancient, I don't know if you want to classify Pan-African doctrines or African spirituality, if we just want to be very, vague and, well, not vague and to the point, but very broad, taught like literally, when a fire literally burns, it needs what? It needs the oxygen to keep it burning, correct? Think about this for a minute. When a fire is burning, what does it give off as it's burning? Carbon dioxide, right? Now, ask yourself this. If we're breathing in oxygen and we need oxygen to survive, is there literally a fire burning within us? Yes. Remember when I read about Set representing the red blood cells, Horus, Heru representing the white, the circle of your blood, the very blood that runs through your veins, there's a burning process that takes place inside of us all the time. And you need a right balance of those red and white blood cells. Oxygen must be given so a certain amount of blood can be pumped to the brain, to the heart, and to certain other vital parts of the body, people. They're telling you this is the solar plexus. Now, we can get into the understanding of the black sun, which is no different than a solar bark of Ray. Ray represents the sun, right? There is a black sun. That black sun is symbolic of when that solar bark goes into the duat, the abode of the void, the abyss, and the darkness. Well, that internal black sun that I was talking about was sits at the bow, and him being the navigator, that black sun also resides within you. There's a more hidden gnosis of this in the demonic integration work. When you understand that, the pandemonium Mandela and the daemons are demons of the black sun. That gets into something else. I'm not going to get into that right now. But this is all connected, people. This is what we do. And we access these concepts via our ritualistic work. We work with these literally in rituals. And we design our work geared towards the hidden understanding of this, but activating this energy and understanding in our psyche. This is what we do. That's the purpose of doing a ritual. I don't be doing these rituals just for the fuck of doing them. I don't offer these rituals on Patreon or now live when people come here and do them actually with us in person just for the fuck of doing them. I ain't got time for that. I do these rituals and work and offer this because the goal is to master ourselves, is what I like to call on another aspect of the pentagram, the 5 points of self-mastery. Mastering yourself spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially. If that's not your goal of being on this path, then I don't know why you're here. You're wasting your time. I know that's why I'm here. I know that's why I do what I do for that particular reason. That's why I do it. I'm not here for any other reason. I ain't got time to just be doing shit to be doing it because it's a trendy thing and everybody else is doing it. I got time for that nonsense. Too old. Okay? So yeah. All right. But good point, Blade of Astartes. Good point. Hopefully I ain't butchering your name. Philithifer Ankh Afro Root Witch Mary Meat. Thank you for joining. Vision TG, yes. Shadow, yes. I know we've done shadow work, and again, I appreciate the compliment and the testimony. I appreciate it. I know some of you in here in this room right now have done shadow work with me. You know I don't bullshit. I get straight to the point. There's not no bullshit. Ain't got no time for games. I'm not one that look. Not knocking anybody or what they do, but there's a lot of bullshit out there. I'm gonna keep it real with you. I'm not one of these spiritualists on YouTube trying to come up with hustles and scams to take your money. I ain't got time for that. I know there's people on here telling you they can do all this work for you, and then of course they're gonna smack you upside the head and hit you with thousands of dollars of cost to do it. If you work with me, you know the only thing I charge you for is the time, and I show you how to do the work yourself. I give you the advice and the instructions. You gather what you need to yourself. There's nothing to buy after that. I don't sell. I don't do reading and spiritual work for you and then come back door, boom, smack you upside the head and tell you, oh, you got some evil spirit on you need removed. I can take it off of you for $4,000. The reason why I can do that, because I don't do this shit for a living. I told you this many times before. I do this because I love it. I have my own profession, my own line of work that I make my money. That's my livelihood. This is something I do just because I love to do it. That's it. But I'm not going to do it for free because it's time. It takes me away from other areas in my life with my children and my personal life. So I'm going to be compensated for my time. And that's the only thing I get compensation for. My time is the most precious gift to me right now. Now I just turned 50 a couple of weeks ago. So I'm at that half century mark, though that's not old. But my time now has become even more precious to me. So yes, I no problem doing consultations, readings, get compensated for my time, but I'm not doing shit for you. I'm going to show you how you do it for yourself. That's the difference. You're going to do this work yourself. I'm not going to show you. Anybody that tells you that's not possible, then they got an agenda. It is very possible. It's just how bad do you want it? And as I said before, there's nothing wrong with having teachers, elders, and guides as long as you're taking the initiative to do for yourself. But when you don't want to do anything for yourself and you want everybody to do the shit for you, nah, I don't fuck with people like that. That's a weak-minded individual. Okay? That's a follower. That's somebody that don't want to get off their ass and do nothing. I don't work with lazy people. Okay? And then, people will come on this path, nothing's working for me because they ain't doing nothing. That's why it's not working for you. But myself and many others are a living manifestation of the success of what this path is about. Spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and financially. I don't worry. Financially, I'm good. I'm not saying I'm a multimillionaire, but I'm not struggling by any shape, form, or fashion on a financial level. Things are good. I got what I want when it comes to, I don't worry about materialistic, mundane things, cars, jewelry, money. I can do all those things, just like many others can. I don't care about any of that stuff because it's not my focus. But I'm going to live life and enjoy it when it comes to on a physical level. Don't let nobody tell you enjoy yourself. Oh, don't be in a fuck that. Have fun. Go out, eat, party. Do your thing, but be reasonable, be responsible. But the most important thing, because if you seek that first, all the other shit comes. Gotta have that spiritual knowledge of yourself. Shadow work is the foundation of that. Once you understand self and have true knowledge of self, only then can you proceed forward successfully on this path. Only then. Because once you understand self, right, and goes to the old adage in Hermeticism and alchemy, know thyself and thou shalt know the gods. See, the problem is people want to get on this path and do all this working with demons and Lilith and I'm doing this and that, and I'm a Luciferian, and I'm a vampire, and this and that, and blah, blah, blah. And they ain't done no internal shadow work. And their life is a fucking hot mess. And things get turned upside down. They don't understand why. Because you didn't start with self first. How many times do I got to say over the many years now, this is an inward journey out, not an outward journey in. That's what apotheosis is, the path of self-deification, of self-mastery. Because you're going within self. I told you the only God you should have been looking for from day one was in the mirror. All you do is look in the mirror. If you would have did that, you wouldn't have had, we could have all saved a lot of time, but it is what it is. That's the difference of what we do and what others don't do. We're not groveling in front of statues, praying to anything and waiting for anything to come back for our salvation. That's not what we do. We have to activate. I don't care if you want to call it Christ consciousness, whatever. I don't really fuck with that, but that awareness, we have to activate it within ourselves so we can activate Messiah energy, if that's what you want to call it, if that's what you need. So we can activate what these deities represent. Because remember, when you go to each of these deities, Set or any of them, they all have a representation of consciousness. They all represent consciousness and knowledge of consciousness. Okay? All right. What else we have here? I King Ruler says, just like in Christianity in the Bible, it says that the Christian God says, I am the God of the living and not the dead. So when they die, he has nothing to do with you. I'm fucking with Set for real. Well, that's true. Enough said. You know, enough said. Man. Yeah. No, I'm just stay here. Just stay here. I'm almost done. Stay here. Hold on a second. Huh? I was going to tell you, hey, I can hear you talking. Just a little bit. Oh, I'm too loud? Yeah, straight ghetto, yeah. Well, you were loud. I'm just joking. No way. All right. Jonathan Kidd, peace. Logan Scott, peace, brother Beniti. Appreciate it. All right. I see Raven pointed Bradley to some of the content I was saying earlier. Appreciate that. This is a good question about Vision TG. Vision TG says, Brother B, how do working with Seth help evolve the inner Agatho daemon in a tremendous way? Because your personal daemon is the higher or the real self. By making order out of your chaos, you can get to the root of your true self, understanding yourself, fixing those things that need to be worked on, fixing some of your weaknesses, what can be anger, frustration. You might be dealing with certain levels of depression for certain reasons. You might have an issue with your temper. You might be struggling with some of your behaviors, your lust, your desires that you don't have control over. In order to access the true self, which the personal daemon or the Agatho daemon, which is just another term for that, is the facilitator that connects you to all these things. It's that bridge. The best way I can describe that, to give you a metaphor, and I've always used this over the years. If you remember the older cars, not these newer cars. If you remember on the older cars, like back in them days, you could change the spark plugs to a full tune-up because it was easy to do on these older cars. The engines, you opened them up. There was all this room. You could get to everything. Because I remember back in the 80s, I did my own tune-ups. I never took my car nowhere to do a tune-up because it was easy to do. You go to the auto parts store, you bought the spark plugs. But there was a thing there was the carburetor, there was the distributor cap also. And that distributor cap, if that went bad, it would make the spark plugs malfunction or misshoot. It was the facilitator that kept the engine going. Well, that's what the Agatho daemon is. It's the facilitator that keeps everything functioning. It's personal. Some have called it in other traditions, whether it was Crowley and OTO and Thelema, he called it the holy guardian angel. Religion calls it your guardian angel. You have guardian angels and protector spirits. But when we go back into the understanding of the occult and the Greek term of it, it represents the genius self, the higher intelligence, the higher aspect of yourself. Is it a separate entity that can materialize and take shape, form, and void through your ritual work? Most definitely. That's something personal, though. But it's a representation of the real you. And this, remember it was saying earlier what I read? Without the darkness or the shadows, right? When you're walking, you see the reflection of the light of the sun and it casts the shadow, right? They say symbolically, that's a reflection of the real you. If you've done the demonic integration work with me, you know the demonic integration ritual I introduced you to out the gate. You get that experience from that. Of course, it's usually connected to that, but that's a good question. All right. What else we got here? Amazing Nini, what's going on? I'm not sure. I think you left. Okay, you see you left. All right. Says, hey, Brother B, I'm late, so we'll watch tomorrow. Hope you had a great day on your birthday. I did. And again, if I know I said it last week, I say it again. I want to thank everybody, whether it was Instagram, Facebook, or here on YouTube, or some of you guys reached out to me personally. I appreciate all the birthday blessings and and wishes, no doubt. Daniel asks, is Set Lucifer? All right, we have to understand this. Yes, he is a form of the adversary, one of the many masks of the adversary. Remember, those are title. Lucifer just means light bearer, bringer of intellect, right? So there's different manifestations of the adversary. So the question is, are they the same? The answer is, might sound contradictory, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that they represent different aspects. The adversary is the adversary. That doesn't change. Adversary has root in the word adverse. To be adverse to all of those things, for an example, we were talking about earlier, that Set represents. Non-conformity, rebelliousness in a good way, where you are not afraid to speak out and stand on your own, etc. So that will never change, okay? But there's different masks or manifestations. So yes, they are the same, but yet different in how these manifestations take form sometimes. Okay, so hopefully that helps you, and you get a better understanding of that as you do your spiritual work. So for an example, you might have titles, and these are all titles because all of them represent or mean something. You might have Set, Lucifer, Satan, right? All these different forms of the and different cultures have different titles for what the adversary represented. Okay, Melek Taus, for an example, when you get into the Yazidi culture, Melek Taus was the peacock angel. He was another manifestation of Lucifer. So when you go do the research on the adversary aspect of Melek Taus, very similar to Lucifer, right? Lucifer would just be the title or understanding when it gets into more later cultures and how it got filtered down into Islam, Christianity. For an example, in Islam, his name is Iblis, which means rebellious, right? They gave him the title rebellious because he did not want to conform to the bullshit and the nonsense of the creation of this mortal being called Adam. He refused to bow down in that story, right? And the Yazidis look at that story differently than a religious Muslim does. That was the right thing for Iblis or Melek Taus to do, because he was of a more diviner nature. And they teach it in their text that it was a test that was placed in front of him that he had to pass. This is all symbolic, but I'm just going to show you how we can look at all these different manifestations and aspects of the mask of the adversary. So yes, the answer to your question is, are they the same? Yes and no. The same that what they represent, yes, they all are the same. But some of them go into specific aspects in their masks or manifestations. And Set is also given the title on this path, the true Prince of Darkness. That's another title. I like to call him the King of Darkness because he's really a king, not a prince, right? We know in religion that term comes the Prince of Darkness, right? You have Jesus, the Prince of Peace, and then you have Lucifer or Satan called the Prince of Darkness. But the funny thing is in the Bible, they're referred to both as the bright and morning star, right? All you got to do is go look in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12, where Lucifer is called son of the morning or the bright morning star. And Jesus in Revelations 22, verse 16 is given the same title. Is it a coincidence in the ancient churches of the East, that symbol of Baphomet sitting like this, you can find Jesus perched on an earth or globe in that same position? That's not a coincidence. I put that up years ago to show people. So who's fucking with us? Is there really, I did videos on that. Go back in the archives. I think the video is actually titled, if I'm not mistaken, are Jesus and Lucifer the same, or is Jesus Lucifer, some shit like that. And I broke all that down to show people there is no difference. And really, when we're looking at Jesus, think about this for a minute. When you're looking at Jesus, Lucifer, it's just another version of the story of Set and Horus. It's no different. See, there's somebody know what they're doing. They're playing, they play these little games with us. All right. Logan Scott. We got a couple more questions here, then we'll wrap it up. Logan Scott says, yes, Set's color is red. Iron was regarded as the bones of Set. That's correct. And he is a war deity. In the Orisha tradition, I know that they attributed the fashion of bones to Ogun. And that's true. That's the metals and the bones, iron. And yes, that is one of Set's titles. And in that book that I put up by Marcus Carabas, he goes into what you just went into. The color red, the bones of Set. And here's another interesting thing, bringing that up to all my people and there's an aspect I work with in one of the Caribbean traditions of Obia, Papa Bones. And Papa Bones is another form of Lucifer, Satan, or the Prince of Darkness. If you're familiar with the Obia spiritual path, I've done a video on that. He's called Papa Bones because you learn through that spiritual tradition to manifest Papa Bones in all 206 bones in your body. There's a mystery behind that. Okay, so there's not a coincidence that Set is referred to, or there's an aspect of Set regarded as the bones of Set. Now you know what the skull, there's a deeper meaning to the skull. This is why the skull is another very powerful symbol we use on this path in our ritualistic work. Why? Like I say, I show my students, you should have a red and a black skull in your altar because we know what the color red represents, that passion and fire, and black represents the darkness. But the skull itself represents what we're talking about here, one, but it also represents the connection of this physical abode and spiritual abode. It's not just about gloom and doom. There's a spiritual significance. Why the skull? People are, why are you guys so big on skulls? Because it represents high states of spirituality. That's why I use it. I love skulls. I have shirts with skulls, jewelry with skulls on it. It's a powerful symbol to me. It represents eternity. It represents higher states of consciousness, higher levels of spirituality and knowledge. That's every time I gaze upon it, and that's why you'll see it in all the ritual work I do on Patreon. You see when I'm posting the videos, my personal work at the altar, I'm big on having that representation there. It's very important. Okay, because remember, imagery is very important on this path when you're working your rituals because it activates this awareness in your psyche. Now, again, yes, is it necessary? Must you use an altar to do magic? Absolutely not. You can do magic sitting in your car because the only thing you really need is your mind. Okay, but when you have time to enhance that imagery, I do like some of that old school stuff. I do like it. To me, imagery, when you have the time to prepare, but as I've said many times before in the past, you are not always going to have time to set up an altar and do a magnificent, vainglorious working at your chamber. You got to also have the ability to be just out and about in a public place. It could be in your car. You might have to do some magic on the fly and be able to do it discreetly and powerful and effective. So no, you do not need an altar to work magic. It is not mandatory. It is just another tool of the vessel. Let me say this, and we talked about this on the show last Friday night when the professor was on, and we were talking about his book, Symbol of Masonry, and it's the occult meaning of masonry and its hidden chakra systems. Okay, we were talking about all that. How remember the magical tools when it comes to your altar, your dagger, your altar tile, your atheme, your chalice, all your ritual tools. They don't mystically contain any spiritual power. You are the one that gives those tools power, the power that you built up as a magician and a practicing adept. So if your power is weak, your tools are weak. Okay, remember, those are vehicles that are used through imagery to enhance your power. They're focal points, just like if you have statues or icons on your altar. Some people say, I don't work with statues. We're not worshiping them. We're not working. What do you mean working with them? All they are symbols. It's no different than a sigil. But I have people that say they don't mess with statues, but they work with sigils. It's a symbol. It's the same thing. Because when you look at I have representation of many statues on my altar, many aspects of Lucifer, Egyptian gods and goddesses, because they all activate a certain awareness in my psyche when I'm working on them. I'm not worshiping them like, say, somebody in East. I don't get in front of them and pray, oh, Osiris, please help me. And none of that shit. But their icons and the iconography of them activate certain levels of awareness in your psyche. They're focal points. Now that works for me. That ain't going to work for everybody. Maybe some people, because I get people say, yeah, I don't really utilize altars. I do a lot of work in my mind. That's cool. That's cool. Ain't nothing wrong with that. I do a combination of both. I think everybody should, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, and it's an opinion. I want to stress that. You don't have to agree with it 100%. I think everybody should experience all areas of magic. Group magic, individual, working with high levels of it mentally. I think everybody should also at least have to some degree that experience of working that full-blown old school traditional aspect of it at your altar. Traditional in the sense, not religious tradition, but that ancient practice of all the ritual tools and all of the imagery that's used in working with these spirits and demons, no doubt. Okay? So, yeah. Logan Scott says, I've heard that Set was for some reason unable to reproduce children. Can you please expand on the esoterical meaning of that and how it relates to us on our journey? Now, there's different areas of opinion on this. Yes, that is information you can find in certain sources. Now, my understanding of that through, and again, I'm speaking this through, my lineage and under the elders I've come up and what I've studied in the occult, is the reason why it's not that Set is a bad thing that he could not reproduce children, that's a bad thing. It's because there can be no replication of who Set is, because he's that unique, because he is the unique one. There's none like him. So the symbolicism of him not being able to produce children, the esoterical breakdown of that is there can be none other. Because creating an aspect through procreation or birth of another child will be creating a weaker aspect of self. So my understanding of that is if Set gave birth to a lesser aspect of himself, it lessens who he is. And because he is the unique one and there's none like him, he must stay unique in its totality. Okay? So that's my understanding of it. Now, you might go into other areas and some might give you another breakdown, but I can only give you my breakdown. There's not one definitive answer to that. It just depends on where you got it from, what source you read it from, or who was teaching it. But that's my understanding of it and my esoterical breakdown of how I work with it. He is unique. There can be none like him, and not a lesser aspect of him, because that's what giving birth would be. So remember the isolation and the loner aspect of Set. Remember, we're talking about in the pantheon and in the stories that he ripped himself from the womb of his mother Nut. He couldn't even wait to go through the full birth cycle, as the story says. He was that independent and isolated and that unique. You can't find that connected to any of the other deities. What other deity in any other pantheon ripped himself from the womb of his mother and couldn't wait to come out? Wanted to be independent even in the womb. Understand the breakdown of that, okay? Mario Polk, I appreciate the happy belated birthday. Thank you. What else we got here? Where did I leave off here? Virginia Green, appreciate the happy belated birthday. Same thing with you, Bradley B. Good question by Bradley B. Happy birthday. I appreciate that. Do you have recorded? Everything is archived and recorded on Patreon. So good question, Bradley. And this comes up a lot. People email me. I want to make this clear. Whatever tier level you join, make sure you read what it gives you access to. But whatever tier level you join, you have access on everything that's on that tier from the first day the channel began to the very present day. So it's not like you join and you only get access from the day you joined moving forward. No. So let me give you an example. So this is clear. I'm glad you bring this up, Bradley. Let me just clarify this, because I do this periodically, because some people think that when they join, it's from that point forward. So let me give you an example. Say you join tier 3, for an example, which is $25 a month, and that gives you access to the classes and the rituals. So let me give you an example. So if you signed up next week, you have everything from when the channel started of January of last year to the present day. So you can go back and everything is archived from day one that I've done on Patreon. So you can see all the classes and the rituals. If you join, say, level 5, which is the Red Magus Mentorship Program, which is where I work with you monthly on a one-on-one basis to help you develop your spiritual path. We work together. It's a commitment to lead you up to your personal self-initiation and then delve into other paths. It's for the serious person that wants to put the time, energy, and work in. But that would you'd be in the mentorship program, and in addition, it would give you access to all the classes and the rituals. That's how the Patreon works. So yes, it is archived, and I want to put that out there for everybody. Whenever you join, whatever tier you join, and whatever that tier gives you access to, it gives you access to everything before you join, from day one the channel started to the present day. All right. So I just want to be clear on that. And again, if you haven't checked that out, it's patreon.com/Beniti, Baniti. All right. Eric Morris, what's going on, brother? I know you was, did you get booted out of the ritual on Friday? Because I heard somebody sound like they were having technical issues. I kept hearing a beep. I don't know if that was you. So hopefully, oh, that was you. Eternal Black Flame. What's going on, brother? I see he's in the building. All right. I'm not sure if he's still here, but I see him in the building. Bradley B says, I look like we got a couple more here. What's your advice on controlling your inner demon? Okay, so before I even attempt to answer that, it would depend on what your definition of your inner demon is. My inner demon is my personal demon. If that's what you're talking about, I don't accept I'm not saying this is what you're talking about. I just want to be clear on this. I don't accept the concept that we have some type of demon that's disrupting or causing, chaos and disorder within us. It becomes that if that chaos devours us. But if you're talking about that in line with your personal demon, again, it's by making order of that chaos through your understanding of how to do spiritual work. That's the point. So that's how you control whether it's your personal demon or if you're an individual that feels like you have demonic energies running wild within you. That means that chaos and disharmony, you don't have grasp of it. You're not controlling it. You're struggling with it. So you gain control of that and create that harmony by your spiritual work, shadow work, understanding that hidden aspect of yourself that you need to work on. All of those things that we talked about, all the stuff we discussed today with Set, all of these things, these are the tools you would use as you described in your question there. Of controlling. I don't know if that's the word I would like to use, but again, I'm only speculating because I don't know in what sense you're saying that. So to me, randomly just go on a tangent would be a waste of time. But through the work and the consistency and discipline of the work is how you do that. All right. Tall and Thin 123. Do you work with acid at all? Most definitely. And we do work with acid through what we call Egyptian Heka, which is a form of Black spiritual magic, all encoded in the Coming Forth by Day / Book of the Dead. And as I said many times before, with Aset, we've done rituals. Go back on the archive. We did a ritual with Aset and Hathor. Aset is always portrayed wrongly as this, and it's true, but she's always portrayed in this one-sided aspect of this mother goddess, this nurturing mother, peace and love. And that's true. There is that motherly nature to it. Don't get me wrong, no doubt. But it's never talked about Aset, how she was a master sorceress, a magician. Nobody talks about the story, and it's in that same book I showed you earlier. This one here, Marcus Carrabba, Seth, The History and Legacy of the Ancient Egyptian God Who Killed Osiris to Usurp the Throne. It talks about that darker, I don't even know if I like to use that word, but that more intense or darker side of Aset. She had a hidden understanding of Black magic and the spiritual mysteries. And he goes into depth in the story of how she was able to get that sacred word of Ra because she wanted to pass that knowledge on to her son, right? But how did she obtain that knowledge? It's funny how men will say, oh, that was wrong and that was deceptive. Remember, the story goes she wanted the sacred name of Ra, and the sacred name of Ra would open her up to the hidden mysteries of the universe. Now, we just went to the whole solar bark of Re. We know what Re represented to what he was connected to. We know Set sat at the bow of the solar bark Re, and he was the guide and the protector and navigated the solar bark through the abyss and the void. As I said earlier, Set sits in that solar bark Re of your solar plexus, and he is the guide of that black sun or solar bark that guides you on your spiritual journey. No different. Aset wanted that knowledge for her son. So what did she do? She asked Ra for the name, and then as the story goes, he lied to her at first. She figured it out, and then she was able, like a sorceress does, to get some of his bodily fluids and put a spell and a curse on him. And the spell or curse would not be lifted until she was given the sacred name, right? And he tried to lie to her a few more times, and he became very sick and ill until he finally gave her the correct name. Now, we didn't talk about how Aset in this whole story, I didn't have time to get into it, but I'll throw in real quickly, that divine feminine energy that people so much like to talk about. I keep letting people know on the spiritual realm, you'll find a lot of these feminine archetypes are more warrior in nature, more intense and powerful in nature. And I'm not just saying that from my personal experience, whether it's Sekhmet, whether it's Kali, whether it's Lilith, whatever. It's different energy when you understand it. So there is that aspect of asset that we uncover and work with on this path. That's more of a dark sorceress type of aspect. Yes, she represents that divine, motherly, feminine energy. No doubt. I'm not saying that she does not, but let's not keep presenting it one-sided as if that's all she represents, because that's just not true. So yes, we definitely work with Aset/Isis in her many forms, just like we do with Set, Heru, and all the other Egyptian archetypes when we work what we call Egyptian Hector. And I don't know why that's not talked about in Kemetic circles, because it's all encoded. The coming forth by day is nothing but a book of spells, or what they call the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead. Those are nothing but magical spells and rituals. And every time when you're reading that book and you see where there's blanks in it, that's for the initiate that has gained the knowledge of the magical mysteries. He would insert his name when the magician or the adept is working those spells. But somehow, somewhere along the line, the Egyptian Book of the Dead / coming forth by day is almost presented as it's some like Egyptian Bible, and it's not. All right. So yes, we do. Answer to your question is we do. Steve Nunez, appreciate the happy belated. Demetrius Clark, what's going on, brother? Good to see you here. I know you had to break out early yesterday. Mark Barrett, as a beginner, how do I begin to learn to work with Set? Again, some of the information, this book here, if you want meditation and ritual practices, that's a good place to begin. This is the book, Set the Outsider, by Don Webb and Judith Page. There's actually a combined ritual with Set and Heru in here. There's workings with Set. It gives you a good understanding. The first breakdown of what I was talking about in the beginning of the video is in that book. Starts on page 15. Everything I'm breaking down, if you came in late, I would go back and watch that. I've done other videos. Go in the archives. You'll see there's other videos on Set. But if you wanted a tangible book with information to begin, and then can lead you to darker work like Set, the Fury of Egypt, probably not a good book to start out with right out the gate. That's the book by Asenath Mason, or it might be by Bill Davenduck, I'm not sure. But Set, the Fury of Egypt, I wouldn't recommend that for a beginner roar out the gate. I mean, nothing wrong with getting it, reading it. I don't know if I would do that type of ritual work if I was a brand new spanking beginner and I didn't know much about Set. But if you want to start with some good workings and rituals and get a good understanding of Set, Set the Outsider by Don Webb and Judith Page. That's where I would start. I'm not one of those people that I try not to instruct people. I try to get an understanding of their knowledge and experience. To me, I think you do somebody more damage. So if I was just to throw hardcore stuff on you out the gate, I'd be doing you a disservice because it's probably going to do more damage than it is good. Now, if you're somebody who's more seasoned and experienced and say, maybe you work on this path with a lot of intense energy, but maybe you don't do a lot of work with Set, that's an individual I could maybe start that could start maybe with a little more intense work. But if you're somebody who's very new on the path of the occult or left-hand path or self-mastery, apotheosis, whatever you want to call it, I would start with something like that. That will give you, I'm always big on showing people first to get acclimated with the energy to see if it works for you, because you might tap in and work with it. You may not feel right. It may not be the right thing for you. So start getting acclimated and familiar with the energy through work like that. And then if you're vibing with it and you're feeling good about yourself and you're feeling good about the work you're doing, then that's going to lead you and motivate you into working with it more on a more intense level. But that's how I operate. I just don't think it's a good idea to just throw people into hardcore shit right out the gate, because that's going to fuck you up more. Trust me when I tell you. All right. Bradley B, on the left-hand path, should we avoid EA coding? I think you meant coding. You put keying. That's personal. I don't tell people. Let me make this clear. If people that know me over the years, I don't tell people what they should and should not do. It's none of my business. Number one. Number two, I don't care who you work with or you don't work with, whether it's EA coding or whoever, whether it's me or anybody else. That's personal choice. That's totally up to you. Now, I can only give you my opinion of EA coding. Not a huge fan. There are some things that are applicable. Some things I'm just not really feeling, but that's me personal. I know there's other people that work with EA coding and vibe with his stuff and they get great results. So that's why I'm saying it's personal. You got to have a vibe and a connection to work with somebody. So again, I'm not going to tell you or anybody else who they should or should not work with. You should make that decision up to yourself. You shouldn't be forced to work with somebody, forced to stay working with somebody, and you shouldn't be forced not to work with somebody. I've always said this, and I've said this for many years going back a long time ago. Anybody that you would come to me in the past and go, oh, don't read that book. Don't do this, don't do that, or don't go talk to that person. That would motivate me more to want to go do that. You understand what I'm saying? Because I find out people that do that have a tendency, they're trying to hide something. So this is why I don't tell people. I always encourage people to experience many things. You should be very broad in your understanding, especially when it comes to books. Read everybody's stuff. Are you going to vibe and resonate with everything you read and who you work with and different authors and teachers and people you encounter on YouTube and social media? No. But the best way to do this, how I do it, like for an example, this book here. I don't agree with everything in this book here, but I don't focus on what I don't agree with. I just cipher out of here what I do resonate with and keep it moving. Same thing with this book here, all right? As I said earlier, this is a good example, good question. Like this book here, for an example, all right? I think they did a good concept of taking Judith Page, and I did my research, and as being an ex-member of the Temple of Set, Judith Page also is an ex-member of Temple of Set, and Don Webb, who is a member and former high priest, he's giving you the darker aspect of Set in this book, which I think is a great thing. And Judith Page is coming, she kind of turned a little more lighter and got into more of the metaphysical aspect, which is okay. But the same thing in that book, I don't agree or really vibe with everything in that book, but I'm not focused on what I don't vibe and agree with. So what we got to learn with whether it's authors like E.A. Coden, same thing with Michael W. Ford. I don't vibe with everything that Michael W. Ford puts out, but what I do resonate with, I work with. Just like somebody might stumble across my channel and my work. I'd be a fool to think somebody's going to watch my channel and loves and agrees with everything I do. I'd be an idiot to think that. I'm not worried about if people love, like, hate what I do. That's irrelevant to me. My job, as I said many times before, all I do is just put information out there. You do with it what you want to do with it. I don't get involved in the whole, love what you, I appreciate the positive comments. Oh, I love what you do, Beniti. Cool. Much respect to you. But I don't feed into the bullshit. I'm not worried if somebody goes, oh, that shit you're talking about is crazy. Oh, I don't agree with none of that bullshit you're saying. That's cool. You're entitled to that. I can't fault you for that because I'd be a fool if I thought everybody that comes across my channel loves it to death. There's probably some people who despise and hate this channel and can't stand a word that comes out of my mouth. That comes with the territory. You understand that? So simple answer to your question, Bradley, is that's personal. That's personal. You got to make that decision for yourself. I don't tell people what they should and should not do. Never do that. All right, Logan Scott, appreciate the happy belated. Dee Dee Heyman, great born day. Appreciate all you guys. Yes, Eva, Iv, Set and Lucifer. And there you go. I'm glad you said that. When I was talking about their different manifestations or masks of the adversary, very different vibes. Not just with Set and Lucifer. I noticed that with all the different masks of these archetypes and deities that you work with. You hit it on the head. There's a different energy and vibration and awareness when you're working. Like for an example, if I'm working with Melik Taus or Samael, and even Azazel, I get a warrior. Like I see manifestations of Azazel as a kind of an assassin figure manifesting out of the desert, but it's a form of adversarial current, but it's a different vibe and energy. It's almost as if they all have their own personality, identity, and vibrational frequency. You hit it on the head. And that even piggybacks further to that earlier question. And I'm glad you pointed that out. That is a very good way to describe it. And I'm on board with that 200%. All right. Yeah, tall and thin again, matter of opinion. I think EA Coden is okay. Again, it's personal. Yeah, and I was saying earlier, Eva, Christ is Lucifer in the sense of what they represented. Because really, when you look at, if you really strip away the illusionary religious monotheistic story of how they present Christ, really think about it. This Christ character in the Bible was he was a left-hand path practitioner. He was very rebellious in nature. He was anti the establishment. He battled the Pharisees and the Sadducees. They were accusing, he said he was God, right? They misinterpreted that, and he tried to break it down for them in many ways he could. He was saying, is it not written in your law that we are gods? He was referring, that's in John 10:34. He was referring them to Psalms 82:6. And he was saying, because Genesis 2:7 says the very breath of the creator, the very essence was breathed into our nostrils, and we that was the breath of life, that we are living essences of the creator. That's what he meant when he said we are God. He was very left-hand path and rebellious in nature. When you really would strip away all the religious shit, all that Pauline Christianity, because most of these Christian groups are teaching the doctrine of Paul. It has really nothing to do with real teachings of this character in the Bible called Yeshua, or Jesus. When you really look at it in its, hold on, I gotta fix this, in its entirety. So that's what I mean. When you look at, they were very similar in nature. The approach might be a little different, but what they represented was right in line. They were very, very, nonconformist in nature. So most definitely. And is there a coincidence the two meet when? What do you think that story esoterically represents when Jesus was up in the mountains fasting and they say Lucifer came to tempt him on the mountain? Can we look at that esoterically as he was struggling with his higher and his lower and higher self, or his weaker and stronger self? That's how I look at that story. I don't look at it like some evil character was trying to see you got to strip yourself of all of the indoctrination we've been programmed with. Now, how I look at that story, knowing what I know, that we all struggle with that temptation story, struggling to do the right thing, right? Where he's offered, if you just jump off, I will offer you all this, all the way. You see the analogies and the symbolism. That's what we should use that stuff for. Don't get caught up in all that nonsense they programmed us with. This good and bad, right and wrong, evil and all that shit. That's where the mind can get a little corrupted and twisted. Okay. What else we got? Yes, E.A. Coden is owner of Become a Living God. He's linked up with many other occult authors like Michael W. Yeah, Become a Living God is that website he runs, or that's his website. But yes, on there you can find the workings of the author. But all those authors have their own separate entities. But yes, you can. They're all connected through that. In the sense that you can find a lot of their work on there. That is true. All right, what else we got here? I'm going to take a couple more. If I'm saying IHVH, hopefully I'm saying your name right. Sigils and symbols are spiritual memes that remain implanted deep in your psyche. Music and art really, really amplifies magic. I've said that many times before, especially with the music. Music is a powerful form of magic. And it's funny, we were talking about this yesterday on a class call we had. And I've talked about this many times over the years. Sound and vibration of music, number one, but also it activates, especially when you go back to older music you might have listened to while you were growing up. And I've always explained a concept that I encourage people to try that I call music magic. And I use this, I've created playlists through different decades, from a young child to the present. And I'll take this, whether it's driving in the gym, and you're able to play this music, and it literally can activate certain portions of your psyche. Spiritually, mentally, emotionally, it can take you back in time and connect you with certain aspects of your being. It's very, very powerful tool. Same thing with art. All symbolisms, whether you're using it through a form of mimetic sorcery, images, sigils, they all activate certain states of consciousness. It just depends on how the person works with them and the connection that they make. That's all. Yes. Also the tall and thin. We use I like to use mantras in meditation a lot. We use that in the work we did Friday night. But yes, we use that quite often. Belade of Ashtaroth says, I always felt the castration of Set was a cult of Horus propaganda to try to weaken his image the same way they also claimed he was barren and couldn't reproduce. Yes, and that's part of the agenda. It's different. Again, it depends on what school of thought, lineage you come through, teachers, source you're using, books. There's going to be varying degrees of opinions, and we have to understand that. I think the most important things that's important, the concept you use, and if it works for you. So if you have your own perception of that understanding and you're applying that effectively in your ritualistic work and your spiritual work, and it's working for you and you're getting results to confirm it, that's all that matters. I wouldn't get too caught up in there's going to be varying degrees of perspectives and opinions when it comes to set. And I do agree to what you said, Blade of Astarte. But I think to bypass that and not to get too sucked into that from an energy perspective, as long as we have a perspective that works for us and we confirm it through the results we're getting, that's all that matters. I don't even worry about stuff like that no more. Because there's always going to be somebody that has a difference of opinion. There's always going to be some fool that thinks they know everything and they're going to want to debate you. And the only way you counter-react that, whether they agree with you or not, you have the catalog of results to prove it. But definitely in that statement, there is a lot of truth to what you said, no doubt. All right. Tall then, what does invoking a deity every day do to the mind and spirit? Again, it's kind of a vague question. It depends on what spirits and deities and energies you're invoking. Now, I don't know if it's necessary to do something every day, because if you're working with a very destructive or intense power, that may not be an energy or deity you want to invoke every day. I think you got to be selective in your understanding first and foremost, and understand and know what you're working with and invoking. And most importantly, what's the intent and purpose for invoking it? I mean, if we're just randomly, I'm just speaking in general. I'm not saying you're saying this because it's a good question. I don't think somebody should just get up and randomly every day and just start doing some invoking. There has to be a purpose and intent for that invoking, is what I'm trying to say. So that's the reason why I say that. That would be the answer to your question. Okay. Now, as far as what it can do every day, you can overdo anything. You got to be careful. You got to understand. You got to regulate what you're doing and know what you're doing and why you're doing it. That's my point. All right, what else we got here? All right. Okay, Eric. So you didn't get booted out last night. Okay, somebody was having problems. And let me just say this: for those that are Patreon members and participate in the monthly rituals, I just want to make this clear. Once we start the ritual, we're not paying attention to the Zoom screen. We can't admit nobody in once the ritual is started. So this is why you always hear me say, make sure your internet connection is stable. We have no control over it. If you get booted out, you're having problems, that's really nothing we can do on our end. I always talk to you guys about that before we begin. I give you the heads up. Once that ritual has started, we're not, those that are there live doing the ritual with me and myself, we're not looking at that Zoom screen at all. That's a memory. We're focused on the work and what we're doing. So if you get booted out, I apologize. It's nothing we can do. So all I can say moving forward, because I know somebody on Friday night was having issues. They kept, I can't remember who it was, and I kept letting them in and out before we started. And it looks like when the ritual started, they couldn't get back in. There's nothing I can do about that. So just moving forward, if you are a Patreon member and you participate in the rituals, just make sure you're at a location where your internet connection is stable and you don't get bumped out of the room. That's the solution. Okay. Unfortunately, I wish I had a better answer for you, but I can't do nothing on my part. So hopefully you understand that. All right. But I'm glad you didn't get kicked out, Eric. Cool. Yeah, Demetrius, I saw you had to break out early yesterday, but you was bringing up some good points, man. Good points. But I know we'll catch up on a future one. It's all good. Soul Bad Guy. What was the book again? Okay, if you came late, again, I'll throw out, because I know we're pretty much at the bottom here. The two books, I always like to give people the sources so they can get this stuff for themselves. The two books that I was using today for this video, this was the first one. This is Seth. It's a long title. The History and Legacy of the Ancient Egyptian God Who Killed Osiris to Usurp the Throne. Very long title. But let me keep it up there. So I would just write down Seth, and the author is Marcus Carabas. Take a note, Marcus's name is spelled with a K, not a C. It's not spelled the more familiar way we are with Marcus, it's Markus. So make a note of that. And then Carabas. All right. If you forget when the video uploads, you can pull it back up. I put it up about 3 times now. The other book is Set the Outsider. Okay. Now be careful. There's a book called The Song of Set by Judith Page that has the same cover. This is Set the Outsider by Judith Page and Don Webb. Make sure it's Set the Outsider. Okay. Those are the 2 books. Okay. What else we got? Yeah, tall and thin. Yes, when you synchronize Asset or Isis, Astareth or Astarte, yes. Again, remember, when we talk about different manifestations of energies that are synchronized and the same, yes, in that culture, Astarte would be very similar to what Asset or Isis represents in ancient Egypt. You can find that with a lot of deities. You can synchronize and connect the energies as far as them being very similar and the same, most definitely. This is what I was saying earlier. You got to understand, as these archetypes or different masks of these deities got passed down through history and cultures, they just changed the name of the title and made it suitable to fit their culture through their language, their practices. And this is why you could look at a lot of these deities and see they vibe and are very similar. So yes, most definitely. Vega Monster, all good. The recording will be up as soon as this is off. All good. Tall and thin. Yes, I've seen you in and out of here for a while now. I appreciate it. Appreciate you watching the channel and supporting. Jeremy Lang, good to see you here, brother. I'm new to this. I think you put knee. I'm knee to this channel, but I think you meant new. That damn spell check is a motherfucker, ain't it? I'm new to this channel, and this is the first time this side has been introduced to me. Well, welcome. All welcome here. And let me say this. I want to make this clear because I get emails about this. I got an email about an individual. And again, I keep it confidential. I guess they belonged to, or they were studying with a bunch of different conscious groups, maybe more pro-Black conscious groups, and they were European descent, and they weren't welcome there. That's going to happen in those platforms. I've said this for many years. Let me say it again. This path and this channel, it does not matter what your race and ethnicity is. It's irrelevant. I don't care if you're Black, Latino, white, Asian. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It don't even matter what your sexual preference or orientation is. That's personal. Nobody cares. All right? That's the difference of what we do. We don't discriminate based on any of that stuff. Okay? I've had people in the past say, oh, because whether you agree with somebody's sexual preference or not, that's your opinion and you're entitled to that. But as far as being able to participate and study on this path, it has nothing to do with it. I want to make that clear, okay? So you don't need to send me an email, I'm homosexual. Can I study on the occult? Yes, you can. You don't even need to send me an email and ask me that. That's personal. And everybody's entitled, what your feelings are about homosexuality and sexual preference is personal. Keep that in private conversations. You're entitled to it. I'm not going to tell people what to feel. We all have our own perspectives on that. And your race is completely irrelevant on this path. I don't care what anybody else says. But if you go to a platform that's pro a certain race, expect that discrimination. It comes with the territory. If you're going to go there, that comes with the territory. But all I can speak is on this path, the occult. I want to say it again. It does not matter if you are Black, Latino, white, Asian. It does not matter if you are straight, gay, bisexual, whatever. It's irrelevant. So you do not need to email me, Brother B, can I watch your channel? Oh, can I participate in the work if I'm this and I'm that? No. Yes, you can. It's irrelevant. I want to say that again. So hopefully anybody that might have had those thoughts in their mind, there's your answer. You don't need to email me. All are welcome here. The only thing that's required of you, are you willing to put the time, energy, and consistency into doing the work to get to where you need to go? So it doesn't matter what you are. Anybody can reach the same heights if they're willing to apply themselves. It don't matter if you're Black, white, or whatever. So I want to make that clear. All right. That's it for me. That's the end of the line here. No more questions. It's time to wind my day down, get a little food, and watch this basketball game tonight. Yes, I'm wearing a Bucks hat. I'm a Knicks fan, but I'm a Giannis fan. So this is why I'm wearing the Bucks hat. I know some of you are looking at me crazy. But Giannis is my favorite NBA player. Okay, that's why I'm wearing the Bucks hat. No, I didn't slide off and change on my Knicks. I'll always be a Knicks fan through the good or bad, unfortunately. Been a lot of bad lately. But I will be rooting for the Bucks and Giannis. Okay, so I'm going to watch some basketball. I don't know what my wife is cooking, but I can smell it. It's shrimp and what? And what?
Shrimp and spaghetti.
Shrimp and spaghetti. Okay, so we're having shrimp and spaghetti. All right, other than that, I appreciate you guys. Again, if you need to reach out, again, go check out the Patreon page, patreon.com/Beniti, Baniti. That's the little guy. Patreon.com/Beniti, Baniti. Check out us on Instagram, Primordial Chaos 9. All the information for the upcoming classes in July are on there. The Egyptian Vampiric class, the Esoterical Occult Bible class number 2. That's coming up next month. You can sign up. If you're not a Patreon member and you want to attend those classes, go to those platforms. Even here in the community section on YouTube, all the information, how to sign up. You can pay either by Cash App or PayPal. All that information is on there. And if you need to reach out to me for a spiritual reading or a consultation, the email is in the description box. Other than that, I appreciate everybody that supports the Patreon, the social media platforms, and here on YouTube. You guys have a good week, and we'll see you next time. All right? Infernal blessings. All right.